Well, hello everybody. Sorry, I was trying to take care of everything that I needed to, and I forgot I should finish my lunch. And it was already 12:03, but I can't wait any longer. I got to start the stream, so hope everybody had a good weekend. And I know that several of you were playing games over the weekend. I tuned in, I watched. It was fun. Nixumia, you definitely need to get better with the controller, or Dr. Boop is going to play most of the game. And because I mentioned that, let's give Nixie a shout out. She was playing Ori and the Blind Forest, and even though her most recent clip is from Fallout 76. That's because I wasn't making clips yesterday because I was working on stuff. We all know I only lurk in other people's channels so I can clip them saying the best things at just the right time. So, lunch, apparently Jen is having Subway, and I had leftover pizza. I don't know what Nixie is eating. Hugo, you're gonna have to offer up something of what you're eating, because I mean, everyone else is shared. So, but yeah, I hope everybody had a good weekend. I had a productive weekend. I got a lot of work done on my project. I actually turned in the next, I don't want to necessarily say the next completed part, but I turned in like the next installment of that part. I just have to go back and I did most of the work, and I just got to do a couple. Well, nothing's not going to be very filling. If you're going for something that's going to be satisfying, you might want to go for something a little bit more oomph to it. So, okay, let me turn this down just a little. Don't want it to be completely competing with me. Never food. I don't think never food is going to be very satisfying. I remember a story or something going that where everyone thought they were eating food, but it turned out it had no value to them at all or something. Tree bark, huh? Well, maybe I get some fiber from that. Use your imagination as in anything is possible. See, now you're sounding like Gwyneth Paltrow, and the one who survives on air, or so she says. I've heard that. It depends on. I think it depends on which bark you get, though. Certain types of bark would probably be bad to be chewing on. So, okay, well, welcome into Monday. Monday, I'm usually joined by someone, so let's go ahead and bring him on in. Everyone, say hello, Chalice Mike.
Hey, everybody.
Aw,
today?
Yeah. The one time that I expect you to say what you normally say, and you didn't say it.
Well, I am in the middle of, I guess, monotonous kind of.
Yes, we're going to give him a little bit of a little leeway. He's a little distracted. He's doing the initial training for his new job, so we'll forgive him a little bit.
You may hear a little bit of typing. I think I'm almost done.
That's okay. We forgive you. So, all right. So, but yes, Jen says hi, Mike.
Hi, Jen.
Oh, so yep.
Hi,
Today is Monday. It's our normal talk show thing, and you can see by the category. Should say it.
Nixumia.
Yeah, Nixubia's there. Dimmer's there. Jen's there. Hugo Dow. Pixel Shark.
Lots here.
Yep, lots here. So that's. He does seem a little bit quiet. I'm not sure if he turned down his settings.
No, I was leaning back in my chair.
Right, because I cranked you up.
Didn't you turn me down the other day?
No, but I cranked you back up.
Okay.
I mean, I've got Discord maxed in my settings, in my Windows settings, and I have you up at 186%, and I have Discord overall at. So you do seem a little quieter today. So we'll let him fix that. I know he will be muting his mic every now and then because he has some typing that he has to do, and he has one of those clickety clackety click keyboards. Is that better, Mike?
Well, I don't know. I can't hear myself. I mean, I can't hear myself over the connection. You tell me if that's any better. I turned it up a bit.
I don't know. Maybe Discord took a poop.
Maybe.
Because it's overall, I mean, Discord is... I mean, not... Yeah.
I really like Discord for its filtering. You know, right now I think they're the best at filtering ambient noise. But yeah, my input volume is maxed.
Yeah, why don't you turn it down just a little, because now you're crackling when you speak.
Is that any better?
Yeah, and I'm going to turn down the background music. Yeah, the crackling's better. Let's turn down the background music. There. Kitty has arrived. Is this the kitty that likes to rabbit solve around the speaker when I'm talking? Well, welcome in, Kitty. Welcome in. Jen, if you ever start streaming, you need to, and you get to the point where you can have emotes, you need to have an emote of a cat wrapped around a speaker.
Because that's how it works.
Oh, this is the annoying loud one? Oh, I'm sorry. See, we have two cats who are mostly quiet, but one of them, I mean, they have their times when they're loud, but one of them, he always picks at night to suddenly be upset and walk around the apartment howling. Now, we can't necessarily hear him in our room because we have things in there to prevent us from hearing the neighbors, but my daughter apparently can hear him. So.
Excuse me.
Okay, well, Jealous Mike, I asked everybody else how their weekend was. How was your weekend?
Just my anxiety level's just been high, but that's
understandable.
Yeah,
you're starting out a new journey.
Exactly.
And you heard my travails last week. For those of you who didn't tune in to my Extra Life stream on Friday on the Extra Life channel, I did an audio cut. It was an hour and a half long, 94 pages. It was 19,700 plus words, 72,500 plus characters, and it took me 10 hours to do. I got to the end of the day, and this part of my arm was so sore. I told Jealous Mike, I feel like I did after those long, 10 to 12 hour shifts tied to a computer at work. Only this time I was standing the whole time. It was rough, but it knocked out everything I needed for the week, and I didn't look back. Like, I'm done. I'm done until Tuesday. So, well, I'm glad you're taking these steps, Jealous Mike. So there's an update on him. He's making steps in his journey. All right, well, so last week we kind of touched on this topic, danced around a topic a little bit, and I decided that previously we had just made the decision to just stay away from the topic for numerous reasons. Not everybody's ready to talk about it. Not everybody's ready to listen. So
it is a difficult, and not just difficult, but it's so commonplace that it's difficult for a lot of people. And it's one of those things that it's incredibly unfortunate that it's commonplace.
Yeah. So we almost touched on it last week, but I didn't want to go into it then because, well, frankly, it was one of those. I didn't want to short shrift the topic because I know it's an important topic for people. And I know that for many, it's going to be a new topic that they don't know anything about. And so I didn't want to try to tack it on to the episode where we had been talking about mourning things that have changed, things that we'd lost. So I made the decision that this week was going to be the time that I was going to tell my story, because it's easier for me to tell my story than others, because I've reached a point of closure. For me, it is a story that I can tell without feeling like I'm trapped in it. Now, that doesn't mean I can't still have issues that stem from it, which is why I've got plans in place for what happens just in case. We even have a game in the background that if I need to, I can switch to Jealous Mike's going to be the one doing most of the playing, but...
Well, maybe playing. I've got other things to distract me.
Yep, that too. So one thing I did want to make sure I brought up before we got too far into it was I wanted to bring this screen up right here. Because one of the things that's important for us is we like people when they come here to feel not alone. Because I think too often when we're struggling with mental disorders, mental problems, we can very quickly start to feel alone. We can feel isolated from people, even people who are trying. We can still feel very isolated. And one of the things that I've found as we do this, and Jealous Mike can speak to this also, is that the more we talk about the issues that we face, the more people say, it's nice to hear somebody else talking about this because I struggle with this also. The hearing somebody talk about the difficulties they face, say with PTSD or something like that, it helps other people, I guess you could say, conceptualize their story or put their own story into words, because maybe you don't know, maybe you don't have the wording. Normalize, there you go. Normalize. Because there are people that struggle with these things. There are people that have faced traumatic events and their brains have never been the same. There are different types of traumatic events. And some, I've suffered from this one a lot. There are a lot of times where I just don't think, and Charles Mike and I have discussed this specifically. There are times when I just don't think that what I went through is the same as what Charles Mike went through. Because, I mean, in one part it wasn't. I mean, it really wasn't. What I experienced versus what he experienced were very different things in terms of our military careers. But that doesn't negate the experience or make it seem less.
And our brains interpret the different experiences in very, very similar ways. And that's kind of going to be the same for everybody, which is why you have symptoms that turn out looking very, very similar despite different experiences.
Yeah. So mostly we talk about PTSD, but there are other kinds of trauma that a lot of the things we talk about can connect to. And one of the topics that we've kind of, like I said before, danced around is the topic of childhood trauma. I've said it before that I've experienced childhood trauma. I had issues that were giving me difficulty before I ever enlisted and before I started experiencing the trauma that I did in the military. But we've never really gone into specifics for a variety of reasons. But today I've decided I'm going to tell my story. So I'm going to start. Going to put some markers down for things so I can edit for later. I will keep the topic about myself. Now, there's some things I want to say up front. If listening to me talk about my experiences starts to push you down a road that you're not ready to go down, then please step away. This is going to be saved. I'm going to put it, it's going to be saved to YouTube. You can watch this later. This is not something that you have to consume all at once. So if you start to feel that this is too much for you and you need to take a break and step away, do so. We will not look down on you for that. You don't even have to tell us that you've gone to lurk, because if you don't feel comfortable drawing attention to yourself, that is fine. Just step away. And if we don't see you again for the stream, that's fine. It's okay. Don't feel like you have to stay because you started. As I said, I'm going to tell my story. I know other people are going to have similar stories, and you're going to feel like you feel connected because of that. And that's good, because I don't want you, like that image says, you're not alone. You're not alone. And we are here. Where did that come from? I think the extra life thing is in the background. You guys are going to need to give me a moment, because I think the extra life thing is still on the other side. So give me a second. Scene change.
Uh-oh, what is this? Oh, okay, I see. So, we are definitely... Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't see anything. There's that scene change, I guess.
Yeah, it's the scene change. Okay, so that was a little harder than expected, but now we're back. So I need to switch over to... Wow, it's... everything is just all over the place now. That's what I get for trying to fix... Oh, I think it's because it's not in focus. Come on. You know, I like OBS Studio, but there are times when it can be a bit annoying. There we go. There we go. And 3 more things go on. Exactly. Yes, you do sound better now, Mike. I agree with them. Okay, so let me switch back to the main scene. Okay. So now that Extra Life's alerts are not going to... I mean, it's nice that someone either followed or donated to Extra Life, but it's their channel, not ours. So, in regards to... I was saying my story. You may feel like starting to share your story in chat. And today I would ask that you hold back on that. There will be that we welcome dialogue on these things, but today I want to focus on telling my story and letting other people hear that side of it. And then if it creates dialogue later, that's what we would rather focus on. So there's and the bot will eventually post it, but I gave these to you, Chelsea Mike, and I forgot them, so I need to get it there. Where'd it go? There it is.
The things for...
Yeah, so the bot will post these also throughout the thing. I've changed what it's posting today to be more focused, but if you feel that you want to talk about your story later, then by all means join our Discord and reach out to us just to say you want to get that role or you want to join that channel, and after stream we'll get you in there and we'll allow and have a conversation. Maybe you just need to listen. Kolgoth versus... Okay, yes, but that's a different stream, Dimmer, so you can save that for a different stream where that's more for Extra Life. So yeah, conversations most likely won't happen today, and it's not because we don't want to listen to you, we don't think your story is important. It's just that I don't know what I'm going to be like when the stream is over, because I'm going to be honest, this is the first time I've ever shared this in a public forum. I've shared it in private, I have talked with individuals, I've shared it in therapy, but in a public forum with people who I've never met listening, and some people that I have met. In the case, I know Dimmer and I streamed Extra Life from his house last year, and I know Cellist Mike. So some people I do, but I haven't told this complete story there. So I don't think there's really any way to just get into it other than to just get into it. So I'm going to go ahead and just start telling my story. Yep. So, and also, just in case, if for some reason you feel it's important that you need to talk to someone immediately, please take advantage of these resources. 1 and 6 is for men who have been through this experience. RAIN is for both, and that's those two. If you go to those pages, it's where you can actually chat with people. RAIN has a phone number line also, and then the last one is the suicide prevention hotline, but they do talk about, they'll listen to just about anything. If you need to talk, they're very good at finding people near you that can get you help. Which is one thing I'm going to say straight up. We are not therapists. We are people who've experienced this stuff. And while I have some training in crisis intervention and in getting people to resources, that's not my role today. But as we go forward, if you find that you need the help getting to someone who can actually help you, who's a professional, we can have that conversation. Just not right this moment. Okay? So I guess I should go ahead and start with the talking. So I'm going to switch over to the game view so Cellist Mike can play while I talk. I have my notes here so that I can start telling my story. So I say that and Jealous Mike walks away. he has to take care of something. So the topic, I mean, pretty much says it. This is a stream about childhood trauma and the aftermath and the road to recovery. So I will be as circumspect as possible when it comes to the specific topics, the specific events. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just going to tell you, hello Thunder Biome, welcome in. Right, that's all. Just take note of the title, and you're just in time. I'm getting ready to tell my story. So, as I said, I will be circumspect as possible, but there are things I'm going to have to allude to that happened to me, just so you understand some of what happened to me in the aftermath. Okay? So, when I was 10 years old, we moved to Germany from Alaska. We were very isolated at where we were because we'd lost most of our support system. Yep. And that's part of what we're doing here, Thunder Biome. So as I'm going to give a brief intro to, briefly touch on what happened, and then I'm going to focus on the aftermath and what my road to eventually getting to the point where I could share. So, as I said, we moved from Alaska to Germany when I was 10. I lost all of my friends. I lost contact with most of them because back then it was a lot harder to keep in touch with people when you moved to a different country on a different continent. And mail took a long time. And unfortunately, my best friend and I had a crush on the same girl, so when I left, I think he kind of... I'd kind of always had her eye more than he did in terms of friendship, because we were 8, 9 years old. It was strictly crush stuff. But I think after I left, he kind of took advantage of that and to improve his friendship with her. But with me, he just stopped talking to me. So when I was in Germany, I had very few friends. In the school that I was welcomed into, we moved mid-school year, so I changed schools right in the middle of the school year, and I did not have a good experience in the school I was in. So I didn't have any friends at school. The church that we started going to, there were people there, but I only saw them once a week because we lived so far away from the base and the community where they were. And after about 6 months, we moved to a different place that was closer, but it was still very isolated. And one of the struggles that parents face when they have children is how do they have time for themselves while also taking care of the children? And when you're in an environment like where we were in a military community in a foreign country that is a small town, it's not a big city. When I lived there this last time, we lived, 27 minutes from our house. We were in the middle of downtown Frankfurt, and there was 2 major metropolitan areas in either direction of us, east and west. So we were not isolated as much there in terms of community and stuff. But in Germany, that first time we were living in a small town way out near the border of Luxembourg, and we were living even farther out away from people that could form our community. So we kind of had to go with word of mouth on who we could connect with to do for my parents, so my parents could get babysitters and things like that. And unfortunately, the word of mouth brought us to a certain person who ended up not being a good choice after all. But at the time, nobody knew. The said person was very highly praised amongst the community as far as I could tell. And we happened to go to the same church. So that was another point in said person's favor. I'm pretty sure... And this is where some of my memories of these events are scattered for obvious reasons. Traumatic events can make it hard to remember. And I will tell you that some of the things I couldn't fully conceptualize in my head until after I started going to therapy in 2016. And so this all happened in 1988. So that's a long time before I could actually... Go ahead. What'd you say?
That's why I'm here today, to help not necessarily focused, but help keep your brain
Yeah.
straight.
Yes.
And not run off in wild directions.
Mm-hmm. Hey, are you actually going to play RimWorld? Because I've got the game on. Because if not, I'll just go back to the talk scene.
Oh, go back to the talk scene. I'll message you in Steam when I am ready to actually turn.
Okay, I'll go back to talk show for now. There we go. All right, so as far as I can remember, this was the first time that this person babysat me and my sister. I was 10. See, we moved to that house in the summer of 88 between school years. So I was 10 and a half, approaching 11. And my sister would have been, she would not quite have been 8 yet. Yeah. I mean, she and I are only 2 years apart for like 2 weeks out of the year. So she would have been 7. And the fact that my sister was there is important to this story. So parents left. They went on their merry way to go to something, some kind of squadron event or something like that. I don't know. Wasn't important to me. All I knew is we had a babysitter, and for the most part, I was going to be, doing the normal. It was a normal evening for us. Go to bed on time, go to school. We were actually attending German school at this point, so we had a very different school schedule. And sometime after I had gone up to my bedroom to go to end my day, it wasn't really bedtime yet. I was just kind of hanging out in my room towards the end of the day. I heard the door close, and said person had entered my room and started having a conversation with me about things that kids do for adults. And the conversation persisted in, what things kids should do for adults. And then it started diving into things that are... No, I'm going to say this next sentence now, but I'm going to qualify it as this. My views on this have since changed. But in the world that I was in, the idea of males doing things together was extremely wrong. That was the world I was raised in. So
you were also 10.
I was 10.
All of this context is of you being 10.
I had no context for these things. This is my first exposure to anything to that side of myself. So that's also important for the story going forward. So my first introduction was this encounter. I honestly didn't know what to say or what to do. And at being 10 years old, it was not like I could make that kind of decision for myself. And the person who was there was a person of authority. So it wasn't like I could argue with him. I wasn't to that point in my life where I was willing to start arguing with anybody. That came later, interestingly, after this event happened. So, yeah, 'cause prior to that, my mom said my sister and I were the quietest, most polite children that got along with each other. It was after we moved to Germany that all that started to change. So, you do the math. So, he proceeded to show me these things that kids do for adults and that, males do for males. And I couldn't pin it down at the time what was wrong. It didn't make sense. And I couldn't have told you what felt wrong about it.
But it was obviously it was a strong sense of this isn't right.
Yeah, there is something that's not right. And it wasn't just the guys shouldn't be doing this with guys. This was or adults, kids shouldn't be doing this with adults. It was something is not right. And I determined later what that was. It was the whole, I didn't actually say I wanted to do this. But I couldn't put that into words at the time because for the most part, I couldn't speak.
And again, you were 10. The entire conceptualization of any of this, it was not something that ever would have been in your experience or in your... I mean, you probably hadn't watched anything sexualized. You hadn't seen anything.
Very isolated.
So this is completely foreign.
This is before I'd ever seen any kind of television show or movie that had anything connecting to adult relationships. I mean that kind of sexual adult relationships. No context for it whatsoever. I don't think I'd even ever experienced the first physical reaction that a male has when they start feeling certain things. This was the first time. And so that confused me even more. But there was one other thing that I do remember very, very, very clearly from that first time. And this is why I mentioned to my sister earlier. It felt wrong to me for reasons I couldn't state. And because it felt wrong to me, I didn't want my sister to have to go through it. So, and this is important for when I get to the therapy later. In my head, I couldn't stop, because if I did, then he would just go down and do the things to her. And even though I couldn't tell you why, it both physically felt good but also felt wrong. I didn't want to put her in that situation, because as much as my sister and I disliked each other growing up, well, once we hit a certain age, there was one thing that I never, ever, ever questioned. It was I was going to keep my sister safe. She was mine to pick on.
You even talked about that theme coming up in some of your nightmares.
Yes.
Where it was all about protecting her.
Yes, and that specifically, I didn't understand any of that until I went through the therapy in 2016. Okay, so here I am, 10 and a half years old. I'm experiencing things I've never experienced before. I'm being told things that I didn't understand. And while I couldn't quite put a finger on what felt wrong about it, which for me, once I got to the point where I could understand consent, that was what it was. But at the time I didn't understand that I hadn't consented, because a person in authority had told me this is what kids do for adults. It's like, I don't know. And then there was the whole issue with my sister. I'm not going to go into the details of what was done. A lot of things happened. It went on for several hours. And this was not the only time. I didn't say anything about that, and honestly, I actually don't know, because I've never brought it up, if anything else happened to anybody else.
Well, it's hard enough to be okay talking about it yourself, to ask somebody else, to have confirmation of fear, to have, that's a whole new ballgame all by itself, is to have discussions with people that...
I don't remember specifically what I dreamed, but I do remember that was one of the first times where I started practicing the idea that I've talked about here in terms of trying to sleep after the trauma that we faced in the military, of trying to disconnect your brain from reality. This was the first time I remember doing that. I just remember when it was over, lying in the room with it being dark, and I felt cold, and I felt like, I don't want to be here. I need to go someplace else. And I just started writing stories in my head to get away. So that was probably the very, very, very beginning of me starting to create worlds to escape to. And I didn't tell anybody, because I didn't know what I felt. I felt like I'd done something wrong. I felt really bad because it felt good. But at the same time, I felt like I had done something wrong. And even the idea of keeping him focused on me, which I'm still not 100% sure actually was what happened. Nothing felt right. And all I could hear was the words, it's okay. This is what kids do for adults. This, boys and men do this all the time. And go ahead.
It was, regardless of any other, physiological responses, you were assaulted by a predator, and we have an instinctual response to being hunted or assaulted by predators. We have that instinctual response, I think.
Yeah. But again, 10 years old, I couldn't fully explain that. I couldn't fully explain anything. I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody. Not anymore. I felt like something had changed. And while I knew that other incidents occurred in terms of the interactions with this person. I couldn't, until I went through the therapy in 2016, give you the exact. I couldn't separate the memories. An instinct. Are you referring to what Charles Mike said about the idea, the instinct of a reaction to a predator? Well, that's the fear instinct. You know when you're in danger, and that was what confused me. Was this particular predator came in a form, in a way that completely disarmed me. And so by the time I realized I was actually in some form of danger, it was too late. Things had already happened. And so it was all confused. And that's why this particular form of trauma is so debilitating to I mean, it's debilitating to anybody, but especially for children who, I mean, the person who's put an authority over them, they expect to keep them safe. And when you lose that, you don't trust anybody. And my issues with my parents, like, really started to spiral after this. Now, I'm going to say up front right now, I do not hold this against my parents in any way, shape, or form. We lived in a time where this was not talked about, and pretty much the only reaction to any of this was to go see a doctor. We didn't have robust mental health services available. We didn't have, I mean, in the States, you had things like child protection services, the people who would come take children away from bad situations, things like that. But we were in Germany, and in Germany, I honestly didn't know who I was supposed to say anything to. So I didn't say anything at all to anybody.
And again, you were 10, you had no exposure to anything like this. Even the idea of having to tell somebody or needing to tell somebody, I mean, who's to say that's even going to occur? That's... Yeah. It's completely...
And that's why I started the story with saying, I wanted to paint a picture for you how alone we really were out there. We were very, very isolated, and it just contributed to my feeling more and more isolated. And I did not tell anyone I don't remember when I finally told my mom, but I think it was after we moved on base. So that was 2 houses later. Because I do remember that once I told her, she did the one thing she knew to do. She took me to the doctor to see if I was physically okay because of the things that happened to me. But other than that, they weren't. The education on what to do was lacking. The world that they were raised in had not prepared them for that. So they just had no concept of what to do. So I just want to make that absolutely clear. And in terms of my parents, while I may have been angry at them for reasons I didn't understand for a long time until after I went through therapy, and some of it was anger about this, even to this day I don't hold them accountable, or I don't think that they are guilty for anything because they didn't know, and they didn't know what to do. And for a long time after it happened, I didn't tell them. So I just want to make sure that's very clear, that my parents did what they knew to do, and they were just as much at a loss as what to do as I was. Okay. So, as I said, multiple encounters. The one thing that I knew was that there were 4 total. Until 2016, and I started going through therapy, I had no recollection of the second one, and that was because it was so much more. I don't want to necessarily say, let's just say a lot more happened during the second one than the first one. The first one, it was, I mean, if you could say it, the first one was downright innocent compared to the second one. Yes. The stuff that was happening during the second one was stuff that I honestly couldn't. I had no memory of it happening until later. I just knew, based on things that I could tell about my body later, that they had happened. But again, so confusing because I still had reactions to it. And it was just so confusing to me. And so here I am. At this point, I'm at least 11 now. We didn't move away from that house until I was 11 and a half, so the next summer, between the 5th grade and the 6th grade. And here's another thing. After this happened, after the incident happened, I was in the first half of my 5th grade year. I was in German school, so 5th year for them. And shortly after that, my mom had to go to the hospital, and she had some care that required her to not be around as much. And German school for us ended at noon. Hey, Cruffles, welcome on in. And so then we went back to the American school, and the difference between me and the American school the first time I moved, when we first moved there the year before, and the second time was so different. I wasn't turning work in. I was getting into fights. I was just lashing out at anybody and everybody, particularly at one student who had it in for me because I apparently got her in trouble the first day I was in school when we first moved to Germany. And so she was constantly looking for reasons to take her anger out on me when she should have been taking it out on that stupid teacher. It was bad. And my mom, as difficult as the time she was having with the medical issue that was going on. I saw. I don't say anything until someone speaks up, but I appreciate you being here, Cruffles. So the one thing that my mom was able to tell was that something was wrong and I was spiraling out of control, and that if they didn't do something immediately, I was going to start getting suspended, and potentially and this is a consideration that military people will understand. I was going to lose my sponsorship if it kept going that way, which meant the commander who was sponsoring us to be there with my dad could yank my sponsorship and send me back to the States. So that would have been very bad. So they pulled me out of school. At the end of the 5th grade, they pulled me out of school. But the only thing that kept me going through that school year was I started cross-stitching because I wanted to make something for my teacher who was pregnant, and we had a baby shower for her at the end of the 5th grade. And so I cross-stitched. I learned how to cross-stitch so I could make her something. I wanted to make her something unique, and I still cross-stitch to this day. Cross-stitched my way through college and all kinds of different projects. It was a nice, healthy distraction. So we started homeschooling. So unfortunately, as nice as it was for me to have a much more flexible school schedule, it just served to further isolate me. And my parents got me involved in Boy Scouts, so I wasn't completely isolated. And anything that church was doing, we were there. But Boy Scouts and church are not the places you're going to go to learn more about what's happening to your body, and when something bad has happened along those routes. That's not where you're going to go. Especially back in the 80s. That's not where you were going to go. So I had no one to turn to. I had no one to talk to it about. And I had yes, exactly. I had and even with me, Cellist Mike, when it comes to the homeschooling, I had less direct supervision because the other reason my mom pulled us out of school was initially German school, and then was the medical reasons, but also my sister was falling behind. She was in the 2nd grade and couldn't read. So she pulled her out also. But as a result, she spent most of her time focusing on my sister because I could do the schoolwork on my own. That was not a problem. But then I would have all this time to myself and not know what to do. So I'd had these encounters, 2 of them. One of them worse than the other. My body was reacting now to things that I didn't understand, and I had no one I could talk to. So I turned to the one thing that was readily available to me where we lived. And anyone who's lived in Europe knows what I'm talking about. Europeans have a very, very different view on adult entertainment than Americans do. It's much more in the open. There is pretty much no store you could go to where it's not there and it's not covered. They don't cover it. It's just right there. Now, some of the grocers in the smaller villages are more likely to only keep, I guess, what you call the high class stuff around. So think certain like Playboy, Penthouse, the top end, the upper echelon stuff. But you go to a gas station anywhere, and it's not just on display. When you walk in the door, all the magazines are usually right there, and it's the first thing. It's not way in the back. It's right up front. And this was back in the late 80s. It was no different back then. German TV at night was German TV at night. They would have, it was always more comical, but stuff was there. So since I didn't understand what was going on to me, but this stuff caused a similar reaction, I dove into it. What I went looking for was, this was told to me, these words were told to me. This is okay that kids do this for adults, and boys do this for men. which also was implied in there that males do this. And remember, I said before, the world that I was raised in was a very, very non-accepting world. Very judgmental world. And I'm going to type something in chat. I'm just going to say the word something because I want people to see it. And Cruffles has it also. If anyone here falls into the category of you haven't been at the places that haven't been open and welcoming to you, I don't want you to feel like this is one of those. I'm simply explaining what it was like for me, where I grew up, and what I was like back then before I came to understand a lot more. So that, and that little icon right before my name and right before Cruffles' name in chat, that's about being open and welcoming and being an accepting place for people of all types. And I just want to make sure that no one here feels that this is not one of those places. So yeah, I dove straight hard into whatever porn I could find. I know, I'm not going to dance around the subject at all. I got addicted quickly. That's how I discovered the stuff on German TV at night. Although I think somebody told me it was there. I remember specifically finding, I mentioned the Boy Scouts for a reason. One of the things that I did while I was there was I started doing all the merit badges, and one of them was the cycling merit badge, which we had to do so many miles of biking all over the Ardennes. It was all over the place. We were anywhere and everywhere. I've ended up going from the base that we lived on, I ended up riding so far out that we were almost back to the house where this first happened. And that house was not close to the base. So we were doing a ton of cycling. And I specifically remember I was always leading. I did not want to be behind anybody. So I would set the pace going up a hill. And I knew that if I got to the top of the hill, then I could take a break. So I was, especially on this one road that led back to that village, it was a 4-mile hill. And so by the time I got halfway up it, I was alone. There was nobody near me. And I remember very clearly passing a magazine and thinking, wait a minute, I know what that is. Turned around, went back down the hill, spun back around, and as I rode by, I leaned over and I grabbed it and I stuck it in my backpack and then just kept on going. I had that thing with me until we left Germany. So that was 2 years later when I finally I just didn't think I was going to be able to find a way to take it, so I just threw it away. I still remember the things I saw in that magazine. To this day, I will never forget those images. And it was the only thing that was causing the same reaction, but it wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. And so I did the only other thing that I knew to do, and this is something that I lived with. You want to talk about the feelings that derive from this in the aftermath. One of the feelings that I mentioned earlier, I felt ashamed of what I did. I felt confused, that I didn't understand, that something didn't feel right, and I felt ashamed that I'd let it happen, or that I reacted. I just didn't understand any of it. And so, I said it already, there really was only one source that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt I could go talk to who would tell me about these things, because my parents weren't going to do it because they didn't understand. I didn't tell them until after the third encounter, maybe the fourth. I didn't tell them for a long time. So I actually intentionally made myself available for that person to come back. And I straight up asked, it's like, I don't understand what's happening. And instead of, again, I didn't know any better. Instead of being, this is a funny way of saying it, but instead of being the mentor, he just took advantage of me again. But I did remember one thing clearly, and I brought this up in my therapy. For some reason, he was a lot less forceful after that. I was still making me do things that he shouldn't have been making me do. But there was a lot more asking if I was okay with something. And generally, I wouldn't answer. I would just kind of, and he would take that as he would. But I just remember there was a big difference between the first 2 times and the last 2 times. And that was pretty much what the last 2 times were. At this point, I didn't understand, and this was the only person who had that I had any knowledge would even talk to me about this stuff. And so the only way to explain it is I was so confused. I don't know. Go ahead.
It sounds like not that there wasn't that the aggression and the force wasn't there, but it sounds like he recognized that it had transitioned to, that you'd have been cowed. It was a standing.
Yeah.
There was.
He owned me.
He broke you already.
Yeah, he broke me, and so being less forceful was in his favor. I guess. I don't know. These are things that I couldn't talk about for years, and after the fourth encounter, which was another one of those me making myself available things, I can tell you that shortly after that, he started getting into, maybe before that, he was starting to get into a lot of trouble, law-wise. And about a year before we moved, my parents, my mom in particular, made a point of telling me that he'd had his sponsorship revoked, and then and he was sent back to the States. So he was gone. She made a point of making sure that I knew that he was gone. And again, I don't remember precisely when I told her. I said earlier that it might have been after the fourth time, but at this point, I'm still not sure. It could very well have been before the fourth time.
Well, and they very easily could have, even if they didn't know details, they could have.
No, I never told them who.
Some of the dots.
I never told them who. I never even told them it was a babysitter. I never told them where, or I never told them when. I never told them who. I didn't give them that kind of information. I just told them, I gave them enough details. Okay, so again, remember the world raised in, they knew I'd had no exposure to this stuff that they knew of. So when I started telling her the details of what happened, there was no doubt in her mind that these things had actually happened to me. So
no, I mean, before you told them, it sounds like they may have not known what was going on or the details, but it sounds like they could easily have recognized that something was different about you since he started babysitting.
Maybe, but I mean, he only babysat us twice, spread out over a year, so I don't know. It's up in the air. I don't know if they put that together. I'm pretty sure that if they had put that together, he probably would have been prosecuted. At some point, clearly, I must have told her because she knew to tell me. She knew to tell me that that he was gone. I think it just must have been so far past it that they didn't think they could do anything.
That's what I was thinking. That
evidence and stuff.
That she made sure to tell you.
Saying this is the problem that people who experience traumatic events have. When you start trying to retell the story, it doesn't always come back. I mean, even now, I know the details of the story, and I have my notes written down, and you just saw it happen. I actually couldn't remember the sequence of events correctly still. And that's part of the difficulty, and you learn this when you do advocacy training, that as a patient, as a victim advocate, because I was a victim advocate for the Air Force for years until I became a chaplain assistant, and I had to stop doing that because it's conflict of interest, not interest, but I couldn't do one job and do the other job at the same time, the volunteer job versus what I was actually being paid by the Air Force to do. But in the victim advocate training, one of the things they like nailed down into our heads during that first training I went to for a week was, your job is obviously to help take care of the victim. But one of the reasons it's so important that you're there is that many victims just cannot tell the story adequately enough for law enforcement to do what they need to do. And that they start getting questioned, and that makes it harder for them to tell their story. And when they were teaching us that in class, I was sitting there going, holy crap. Holy crap. This explains so much about why I was having such a hard time still telling the story, because I couldn't remember the details. And I didn't understand the effect that kind of traumatic event had yet. And that was in 2009. So 7 years before I finally went to start getting, I officially went to get help. So, okay, so go ahead.
Wow, the timing of that, I remember like that's the same kind of time frame that I started thinking that you were less of an a-hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because remember, I've disappeared from where we worked for the better part of a year because I went to training and I replaced you out on that in-place deployment. Right? So, but counting all of that, by the time I got back from that and they did ALS, Airman Leadership School, I came back and then immediately left to go for a week to do victim advocate training. So in summer of 2009, I finally came back to the shop. This was just after that training had happened. And then a couple months later, you and I are working up in DOT together right before you went on your deployment the next year. So yeah, that's that you and talk. If it helps you conceptualize our relationship, yes, in early summer 2009, I went through victim advocate training, and that was at that point that I really started to understand how much I didn't understand about what happened to me.
Well, it's more of a perspective on the changes in your like outward behavior to the people around you in that time frame.
Mm-hmm. You go back and ask anybody who worked with me in Georgia for the first couple of years there. I was an argumentative SOB. I mean, I didn't like authority. I didn't like. I particularly didn't like authority that didn't make sense. So, I mean, I understood the idea, the need for authority, but what I didn't like was authority that just said, "You're going to do it because I said so," because that doesn't make sense to me. Because if I remove you from the picture, because you said so is now no longer a valid argument. So, yeah. But I was and this was not me having issues with people in authority. That stemmed back. That went back to the years in the aftermath when I started really, really, really fighting my parents.
Well, and it was the concept of authority had just been broken for you.
Yes, exactly, Jen. It's a non-argument. I would prefer somebody to give me an actual valid reason as opposed to because I said so. And the military's excuse in the military situation is there are times when you just have to, because people are at risk, you're just going to have to follow my order, and you need to learn how to do that now. And my problem with that thinking was we are never in that kind of environment. And it's insulting to me and everyone else around me because we're so intelligent, because we're all linguists, we're already, that's just a given, that you think that we are dumb enough that we can't realize the difference between a life-threatening situation and a non-life-threatening situation. But, I mean, that's how they do everything. Like, you need to learn to follow orders immediately in all contexts, because you never know when it's going to happen. And I just never agreed with that. And it's the same mentality of because I said so. Anyway, that's a tangent, but it's kind of connected because of my issues with anger and resentment towards figures of authority. And it's interesting that you put that connection together, Mike, about me going to that class and that being about the time that you and I started to finally stop ticking each other off. Because when Charles, Mike, and I first met, and we've said this before, he hated me, and it didn't get any better when we finally started working together. For different reasons.
We did find that common ground, but the timing of it was about this time where you started. Apparently, I was completely unaware of it, but
yeah, that was around the same time I also started seeking. Yeah, that was around the same time that I started seeking help for the anger. Like going to see the chaplain, going to see the approved counselor who we didn't have to worry about top secret stuff around. So if we accidentally let slip something that we were angry about at work, it wouldn't matter. That's when I started seeking help for the anger too. It was the same year. Was that when the process of recovery started, or that before? I would say this is the thing about the process of recovery. There honestly isn't a defined start point. In some ways, my process to recovery started when I finally started standing up for myself. The problem was I was so unfocused on where I should focus that standing up for myself that I just aimed it at everybody. But considering how the situation started and how I had been cowed over and just basically beaten into submission on this thing, for lack of a better term, the the fact that I could a couple years later stand up for myself and say no to things. If you think about it, that's a step in the road to recovery. So everybody's road to recovery is going to look very different. And while there are some common elements, just like there are common elements in grief, the stages of grief, and there's common elements in recovery from other trauma, everyone's road looks a little different. Because everybody's road to the trauma looks a little different. Everybody's road before that. I mean, the circumstances that I found myself in and my family found ourselves in contributed to how bad the situation got. It is a step. And honestly, if I was going to pin, lashing out as unhealthy as it is can be improvement from being a broken, isolated mess. Yep, that is very true. But if I was to pick a point when the recovery really started, it would be in 2011 when I'll get to that in a moment. There's something happened at the end of 2011 that kind of officially put my issue on the radar of other people in my life. And so that was when, if I was going to pin a point to say, okay, this is when I feel, and even though it took another 5 years, that was really when I started trying to not keep things as tied off in secret. Yeah. Did I immediately realize? Yes, I did know that something was off. I didn't believe him. Okay, so this is why I started with that very closed off view, the worldview that I was raised in, that men didn't do things with men and children didn't do things with adults. Those two things just did not ring true for me. But the first one more so. I didn't understand the idea of consent. I honestly could not have told you at the time that I had issues with the saying that boys do this for adults, boys do this for men, children do this for adults. I couldn't have pinned those down as these were the issues that I had. I couldn't have told you. I just knew something was wrong. Something was off. And at the same time, holy crap, why is my body reacting this way? I am so confused. What I didn't realize later, until much later, and honestly, I couldn't tell you. It may have been as late as 2009, but I think I was already onto that before that, was the idea that I didn't give consent. And I remember thinking that I didn't want to do this back then. I didn't want to do this. It didn't matter how much my body reacted in a pleasurable way to what was being done to it. I still didn't want to do it. It was new, it was strange, it was confusing, and I just didn't want. So even, I guess you could say, even at the age of 10, well, I couldn't have put the term, I couldn't have said I did not consent. I could easily have said I didn't say yes, or I said no, although I don't remember saying no. That was the problem. I was so confused by the way this predator approached me that before I realized what was happening, things were being done to me, and my body was reacting in an entirely new way that I didn't understand. I mean, I don't think I'd grown hair anywhere but my head and my eyebrows at this point.
Yeah, the places in our psyche that are affected by that are so complex and complicated. The idea of part of your body enjoying it at the same time as it being abjectly terrifying doesn't surprise me.
Well, and I would say that on a professional level, medical level, psychological level, in terms of the industry and stuff, they knew back then that your body you could say no to something while your body was still saying yes. Like it was feeling pleasurable, like, yes, this feels good, while your head was saying, no, I don't want to do this. And remember, there was that whole thing of, and it's come up several times, the whole, she says no, but her body says yes thing. That was so prevalent in the misogynistic society that was the 20th century.
Yeah.
And hasn't really gone away. That wasn't just subjected to used. I mean, it's predominantly used that way, but I mean, it was done to kids too. But I mean, that's the idea there. Your body physically reacts in a way that means it's enjoying itself. But if you don't understand it, especially as a kid, if you don't understand it, you don't know that it should or shouldn't be happening. I mean, you can have an idea that you didn't want to do it initially, but when your body starts reacting that way and it just feels good, you're like, oh crap, now what? I don't know what's happening, but this feels good, and I just didn't know, so I just shut down.
I mean, that's confusing for adults.
It is very confusing for adults.
It's just
that was something that stood out to me at that victim advocate training, was the idea that your body could still react in a way that says this feels good, but it still be wrong. So, I mean, that course helped me with the terminology, I guess you could say, with the clinical terminology for all that stuff. These are things that I had figured out over time. It's very incongruent. You're exactly right. It is very incongruent. And that's why this specific kind of trauma on children is so confusing and it's so formative when it happens. It can totally screw them up. And I was not freed from that. I was definitely screwed up, and it affected my relationships going forward. So for getting back to the aftermath story, I became belligerent, I became argumentative, I became isolated. I know my mom told me years later that she went to bed every night afraid that she would get up in the morning and I wouldn't be alive anymore. I had to actually tell her at one point that I had never in a million years even imagined the idea of ending it like that. The thought had never even occurred to me. But she went to bed terrified every night that was happening, that was going to happen, because something was clearly off. And I remember she didn't know initially, but by the time I became much more belligerent and much more argumentative, she did know. And that's, again, I'm not going to say my parents were perfect. They had their issues too, and their parents before them had their issues, but a lot of it was just lack of education. Specifically when it came to what happened to me, a lot of it was lack of education. On their part. Well, I wouldn't see. I don't want to say on their part. I want to say on society's part. This was not as well. These are things that people just didn't talk about. I mean, even today, people don't like talking about this. They're all for helping people who find themselves in that situation. But if you want to say, let's sit down and let's talk about what my experience was like, and I'm going to tell you what it was like to be on that side of it, people get squeamish. People don't want to hear about how you enjoyed it while at the same time you didn't want to do it. They don't want to hear about the actual physical act, which I've stayed away from in this particular context because I'm trying to keep this at least PG-13.
Well, and the specific exactly what happened,
Mm-hmm.
it can be relevant, but the concept is so overarching that if you want to address the concept in your mental health, then those details don't have to be specified.
Jen, I would agree with that. It's less about the act. The act is important in terms of how it can affect you, but what the result of that action is what is really where you really hit. It's where the rubber hits the road. But I don't want to let this point go without saying this one more time. Sometimes people need to talk about what actually happened for you to really understand what's going on. And I can tell you, in the world that I was raised in, if I had tried to go to someone who was who I could have identified as a safe person in that world that I was raised in, and said, this just happened and I really enjoyed it and I'm confused, I would have been called out for enjoying it. Even though I didn't want to do it, and what was being done to me I didn't consent to it, and I didn't understand what was happening. And I couldn't have told you why I felt good about it. I enjoyed it. The world that I was raised in, they would have judged me for that and made me get to a point where I was going to repent for feeling good about it before they would be willing to address the bigger problem.
There would be, yes. So if you were in a place of massive confusion and vulnerability, there would be so much focus on the perceived wrongdoing on your part that any of the, help with the confusion or the frustration or pain or
I want to say one more thing. A lot of these people just didn't know what to do. And I'm going to give you a completely unrelated, completely innocent, similar scenario. Just the other day, I went into a chat program to ask the people who had built this other program I was using for some help on a problem. And instead of addressing the problem that I needed help with, they focused on what they knew they could help me with, what they thought they could help me with, which wasn't a problem at all. In this case, they were telling me, why don't you just do a fresh install of Windows? Because clearly, or when you did this fresh install of this program, you forgot to delete this stuff, so you didn't really get a fresh install because all your stuff stayed. And it didn't matter how much I explained to them. No, I did all that already. I've done a fresh install of Windows since after this problem happened initially, and I have done a complete wipe of all settings and started from scratch. But they couldn't get past that part. So in the world I was raised in, there just wasn't enough information out there. I mean, I've described this before. The way a lot of Christians view sex is, and not just Christians, there are other societies that are the same. The way they view it is, it's like you're at a church, you're at a picnic. It's a nice, beautiful day. Everyone's hanging out, enjoying their barbecue or whatever, and there's a little river going by next by, and suddenly an alligator or a crocodile leaps out of the water and mauls a girl, and it goes back into the water and is gone, and the girl is sitting there mauled and in shock and everything, and everybody runs over and makes sure that she's not bleeding, that her wounds are tended to, and that she's covered, she's got adequate clothing. But after that, they leave her be, because all of the visual signs have been taken care of. But in the ongoing trauma that's going to subject her to, they don't know how to deal with it, so they just don't. Yes, exactly. It is, and if you've never been through it, it is really, really, really hard to conceptualize what this is like, especially in the world I was raised in. You tell them that you enjoyed something, that they understand. But what to do about the other side, some of it is just disbelief that something like that could happen. And that's if to be honest, that's part of the reason why advocates exist at all. Because too often, because the memories of the event or just our sheer unbelief that something like this could happen, twist what we ask and how we view it, nobody believes. So that's the whole reason advocates exist, to basically protect the victim from people who are going to say, hey, clearly this didn't happen because you can't remember blah, 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 blah. And the victim advocate would then step in and go, hey, no, here's the evidence of why this would be so traumatic and difficult to understand. Now, why don't you back off? Because you're clearly not here to take care of the victim, and let's get somebody else in here. That's why we have advocates. And it's sad that we have to do that, but that's why programs like that exist. Yes, their experiences haven't taught them about it. And that was the world that I was in. People didn't have experiences with this because people didn't talk. The fact that I was eventually willing to tell my parents about it showed that I knew something needed to be done. But I'm going to be completely honest here. I don't remember ever telling my mom, but I know she knows. And I know that she knows who did it because she made a point of telling me when that person was no longer had access to me. I do not have any memory of telling her. I don't remember going to the hospital. I don't remember the exam or anything. None of it. The only memory I have of going to that particular hospital on our base was for, I can't even remember. It was some shot. I was dehydrated or something. I don't even remember that much. I have no recollection of ever going to that clinic for anything else. But apparently it happened. It's just there are whole parts of that experience that are just gone to me. So, and that served that lack of understanding, the lack of experience. With, even if not necessarily experience with being victimized, but experience with people who have been, it just serves to make the victim feel more isolated. And I did feel more isolated. Now I know most teenagers feel misunderstood and that people don't get them and blah, 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 blah. And I make a point of pointing out to my daughter whenever she says things like that, that you and every other teenager on the planet just said those words. Because my daughter really doesn't have experiences like that. Now, she's aware that these experiences happened to me. We made a point of making sure that our daughter understands what consent is and understands when things should or shouldn't happen and stuff like that. I mean, as early as she was able to conceptualize it, we made sure she had an understanding because we didn't want her to go through what I did. But she still hasn't actually gone through it. Now, she's experienced traumatic events into terms of loss of animals that have been close to her for her entire life, the loss of her entire friends, all of her friends, everything. We just ripped her out straight out of her world and brought her to a new place. So she's had some similar experiences to me, but that level of traumatic, no. So it's going to be hard for her to actually conceptualize what me saying no one understands what I've gone through versus when she says it. Because for me, I literally knew no one else who'd gone through it. I really felt alone. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know that there were communities of people like me until much later in my life. So I felt very much alone. And as I indicated already, the only two sources of information that I had to go on were what was readily available to me that made me feel the same way. So porn, and the one person who I'd had any kind of experience with until that person was no longer around. So from that point on, it was just me and my addiction. And boy, was I addicted. Now, this was in the era before the internet, people. So it was a whole different process of getting this stuff. But I remember having access to, in some way, shape, or form, to it and seeking it out for a long, long, long time. And that feeling of, again, the world I was raised in, I knew that it wasn't necessarily healthy for me to be doing that, but I just didn't listen to it because I'd already had something happen to me that I knew wasn't healthy for me. So, but I can tell you that over time, I really started to feel the wear and tear of all of that false information that I was feeding into me. It started to twist the way I looked at relationships. It started to twist the way I looked at people. And it never got me to the point, I never came close to the point of becoming, which is one of the biggest fears people have, becoming the person that did this to them, becoming your own worst nightmare. I never made it quite there, but I can tell you that when I finally started to have relationships, I was so misinformed and so by what happened that, I mean, everybody's kind of clueless when they first start out with relationships, but I can tell you that the things that I'd seen and the things that I'd exposed myself to and what had been done to me twisted my views on those things. And it wasn't until my wife, now I'm going to be very clear on something. I told my wife a lot sooner than I probably should have about those things, but I didn't. But it was still well after we were into our relationship, and she didn't know details. She didn't know specifics. And honestly, I'd have to ask her as to when I finally told her everything, and I don't think it was until earlier this decade. So we went through a decade of marriage before it really started. I really started to get into the details for her. But I can tell you, when we first started our relationship, everything I thought I knew was so wrong, and it so messed everything up. And sorry, it's hard to put this all into a single straight storyline. It's easier to write it down. Which,
how about you take a breath?
Yeah, I'm gonna take a drink of water.
Okay. I think you wanna take like a short breather and come back, or
yeah. I'm gonna go. At the very least, my watch is screaming at me to walk. So I'll be right back.
Take a short break.
Yep, I'll be right back.
Okay.
No, the watch isn't the boss. It's just it's reminding me to do things that I've told it to remind me to do. Oh, and I should give credit where credit's due. This game called Wandering Wizards is the product of Instafluff, who I think is currently on his way back from TwitchCon. He also made Stream Puppy, which is what I use to manage the stream, which surprisingly has been behaving today. Knock on wood. So I like having this on for the be right back screen because it gives you guys something to do. He also makes the Candy Time game that I use on my writing stream. So, I did a little jogging in place to get the heart rate up. Now I'm going to go back to the regular screen, but this game will keep playing there. So if I have to go back to the be right back screen later, you'll still be where you are with your points. Yeah, that's one of the things the watch was telling me to do. Breathe.
All right. So you want to try to write this down, or you want to try to take a little bit of a, extend the break in place from the game?
Oh, I'm good. The problem was I was kind of like, where do I go from here? Kind of thing, but I think I know.
Which is very easy.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think I know where I want to go from here because I was just kind of hitting on it there. The fact that I was having a hard time telling it. Hey, RD Mac, welcome in. The fact that I was having a hard time is it gives me a good starting off point to go, because here we're pretty much working. This is what I don't want to say it's ever a downward slope, but if there's a point where it started to turn into a downward slope, in terms of, well, we've reached the top of the hill, it's downhill from here kind of thing, not downward. I'm spiraling downward.
That doesn't really happen.
Yeah, it doesn't really happen, but if there was something that could be defined as that, this would be, where I'm at now is about where we could transition into that. So
okay.
All right. So now that's it. But yeah, if you feel the need to, if you want to play the RimWorld game we have going on in the background for people to watch while I talk, you can just let me know.
Well, I'm still doing my processing.
Yes, he's starting a new job, and so he's setting all that stuff up. So, all right. So, while I was taking the break, I was sitting there thinking about how I've told this story and how much I've told this time, and that gave me where I wanted to go next. And that's in the way I've told this story today is the most. I don't want to say most informative because I have been leaving details out, but I'm sharing more of the story in one go than I've ever shared in a single go before. And that is part of that path to recovery. When I first started telling this, there were parts that I left out. I didn't talk about the effect that it had on me. I never talked about, until after the therapy started in 2016, I never talked about how for this third and the fourth one, I made myself available because there was no one else I knew who I could ask. This person had established themselves as an authority on that, and as Chelsea Mike so adequately said earlier, he had beaten me. He had cowed me into this is our relationship. And it's the only source of this relationship for now where I can feel this same thing that I felt before. So I never talked about that. I never shared that until after I went through therapy 3 years ago. So, 3 years ago. I started in June of 2016. So that idea there of how I told the story and how each time I was willing to share a little bit more is kind of, it's a part of that. It's a sign of that you're making steps forward. But I didn't understand that. I just was more willing to open up. So maybe I was just feeling safer. Were you going to say something?
It's one of the therapeutic benefits to the, a number of different therapy models kind of encourage you to share that story over and over again.
Yeah, the idea of the therapy model is to get you to a point where you're no longer, when you experience memories of the event or you see something that makes you think about the event, you don't feel like you're still experiencing it. And unfortunately, the cycle that I got myself trapped in, which I really didn't even start to make any headway on until much later, the cycle of, the addiction that I got myself trapped into, that was just... Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. What did you...
cycle that you had gotten into.
I know. What did you say before that?
Sharing the story repeatedly. You were talking about every time you share the story, you have a couple new details that kind of come out. And I mentioned how therapy models, so many of them, encourage you to share that story over and over again.
Yes, it's the encouraging you to share the story. The idea of the therapeutic process is to get you to a point where you can tell the story, and so you don't feel like you're in it. And unfortunately for me, the addiction that I got myself trapped into kept me at that point where I didn't feel safe. That was where I was going with it. Thank you. This is also something that comes with this is I don't feel that I can't talk about this, but the longer I talk about it, the harder it is for me to put some of these sentences together, just because it's taking so much focus.
Well, your brain is quickly running out of steam. I think it takes a lot of willpower and mental and emotional energy.
And just in case anybody's worried about me, I have my recovery plan. As soon as I'm done with this, I walk the dog. My therapy, my PTSD, he's still kind of in training, but service dog. I'm taking him for a short walk so he can empty his bladder. I'm sticking him in his crate, and I'm getting in the shower, and then I'm taking a nap with him until my family comes home. So I have my recovery plan, and I also have my therapist is on call. If I need her, she's ready for me to call her. So I try to make sure that I set myself up for success, which, again, is not something that I would have done 10 years ago. And you are right that being able to speak openly is a sign of personal growth. And while I was willing to speak to some people openly about it, I wasn't willing to speak as openly. I was afraid. I was honestly still afraid of what people would think of me. Not because of the things that I experienced, how I responded to them, what I was doing as a result. My wife knew that I'd had a problem with porn before we got married. She didn't realize that I was still trapped in it until 2011. I lived with that shame for a decade, at least, married. Almost a decade, because it was before our 10th anniversary. But when it came, I got quote unquote came out that I was still trapped in that. Yeah, and she actually actually said, "You can't do this alone. You're going to need help," and came alongside me with that one. That was a huge moment for me. The being able to finally just say, yes, I could finally say, I'm so ashamed because I keep doing this, even though I was in no way, feeling like I should go somewhere else. So I'm going to make that very clear that despite my rough start, when it came to my relationship, my intimate relationship with my wife, once I committed down that road, I have stayed committed down that road and have never once thought about leaving that road, ever.
But it's an example of the contradictory emotions that happen as a result of any kind of trauma like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so your body, whether neither of us are psychologists or psychiatrists or neurobiologists. I think that this is the sort of conversation that could end up in dissertations. That we are nowhere near capable of really addressing, but
I can speak to at least one part of the physiological side of that addiction. If you've said everything you want to say.
Oh, I was just going to say that, regardless of the addiction, regardless of your desires, your behaviors, your emotions towards your wife aren't somehow invalidated. It's more complex. way
Well,
more complex, and it throws a lot into it.
But remember, I said, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes ago that when we first started, I had a very, very, very unhealthy view of intimate relations. It was completely warped by fake. I mean, yeah. So again, I was mentioning the problems that I had with this coming from the worldview that I was coming from. I still think that it can be destructive, but I also very much am of the view if you choose to do what you want to do, as long as it's between consenting adults, and if it's just you yourself, then clearly you're consenting. You do you. I'm just talking about the effect that it had on me. Okay? So, Cruffles, to what you just said, that you don't think you're defined by things that have happened to you. It's what you decide to do with the experiences that shape who you're going to be in the future. This is my book. And one of the things that I tell people when they ask me what the book is about is I tell them that it's a book about trauma, about living after trauma, because unless it kills you, you got to live with it. And what kind of person are you? Are you a victim or are you a survivor? Are you defined by your experience or do you redefine the experience? And I put it in a future setting, and I put dragons and magic and all kinds of future tech in there. That usually gets them at that point. When I tell them it's a story about trauma, they're like, ugh. And then I add that part, and like, oh. But if you remember earlier, since I have it in hand, you remember earlier I was talking about how I felt after that first incident, how it was dark and cold, and I just wanted the world to go away. To those who haven't, or don't have a copy of it, I'm going to read you the opening that I put to the book, the dedication. To the broken, the shattered, those whose world has been torn apart. To those hiding in a dark room, longing for the light. Those who have lost hope, this story is for you. And I gave a copy of this to someone at DragonCon who, through conversation, which I will say was helped by the fact that said person was slightly inebriated, so I made sure that her best friend knew to say to her that she needed to remind her, you said, so this is what you said last night, so she could deal with that if she needed to. But I showed her that opening, and I mean, she essentially left the party. She took the book and she left the party with her best friend, because clearly that message rings true for people. And even standing there reading it, I was thinking about being alone in that room, without hope. And I still, when I read those words, I remember what it was like to be that little boy in that room by myself. So yeah, the whole. Oh, and to comment on your thing, Charles Mike, the physical reaction. They have definitively proven that the reaction that your brain has to certain forms of adult entertainment is a very similar reaction to certain drugs that you can experience. It's just like any other addiction, whether alcohol addiction, gambling addiction. Addiction is addiction. So it's not that everyone who exposes themselves to some kind of adult entertainment or goes gambling or goes drinking is going to get addicted, but addiction your brain reacts the same way to whatever addicting substance you're using.
Yeah, and in this case,
it was the feeling.
When you have something is messing with your brain's ability to create and use positive endorphins, like emotionally feeling positive endorphins, and then suddenly there's something that does it really well. Of course you're going to get addicted to it.
Maybe, Jen. In some cases, it's just that's the only place they're allowed to do it. So, and yeah, that's the way you just put that. That trying to create a positive endorphin rush that you get from the same thing. That release that you get that when you reach a certain point in an intimate moment. That is very hard to duplicate, and I can say I don't think I ever would have made the progress I did make on that until after I had a source. That's the best way to say it. A source that wasn't a threat to me, I guess you could say. I had a healthy context for experiencing intimacy. Once I had that construct, it was easier for me to recognize how the other one was unhealthy for me. Did I put that in a way that makes sense?
Yes, and yeah, that is it's so fundamental to our psyche that without that healthy avenue, without structure to allow for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I managed to. That's what I managed to. well, thanks for that emote. I think I got it. I think I communicated it. Thanks for that. I can fix it later. And I am noticing you guys commenting in chat. I'm trying to engage with it as much as I can. Just please forgive me if I miss something, or I just don't know what to say. So
I'm also watching.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate the way chat has been staying engaged with the story. It's very nice, and it's not been too distracting. So, because this can be a very distracting topic. So having that healthy construct, that healthy thing, gave me the opportunity to finally, and frankly, I didn't do it on purpose, but I think subconsciously I may have, because you don't have the, again, this is my relationship with that form of adult entertainment. This was my experience with it. You don't have that kind of experience in coming from the worldview that I came from without getting really good at hiding it. And I mean really good at hiding it. And
none of this is about judging other people. This is about the context of your story.
Yes. And I want to reiterate that. Remember how I got into this. I was seeking an answer that I guess you could say made sense, but I was seeking an answer that I wanted. Thanks, Gruffles. I appreciate that. I was seeking an outlet that I chose. I think that's a big one. The context of me finding a magazine or watching a movie of some kind, or staying up late and watching German TV when I lived in Germany. The idea behind that was, this is a context that I'm choosing and I have complete control over, and it can stop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you had no context for what had happened, and being in Germany, you had some visibility on, hey, there is this stuff here, and you were able to make that connection. And so something that is in commonplace day-to-day society, it would be to me, that would seem like the normal, natural, easy, why in the world would your immediate reaction be go to him? That kind of takes a progressive work towards going back to him.
Well, that took a couple of years. That took a couple of years, and it wasn't immediate after the first incident that I started seeking out some other. It had to be after the second incident, the one that I had such a hard time remembering ever happened, but I knew it happened. I just had a hard time remembering the details of it. But so yeah, I was seeking.
If you can process it without remembering the details, I think that's kind of magical.
Well, yeah. I mean, no, it was more of what I meant by that was, I knew that it had happened, but I had no memory of what actually happened until I started going through therapy, and some of those things started to come out.
Oh, gotcha.
So, but yes, my choice to go down that road was completely my choice, and in that, I'll say that now without any shame. This was me taking control of something that had been taken from me. And yes, it may have been in the long run unhealthy for me. At the time, I needed that sense of control. Oh, I had dreams. Oh, I've had issues with dreams for as long as I can remember. They've been more recently changed to other things. So this is the difference between Cellist Mike and I. There's a topic that I'm unwilling to discuss yet. And he is. This is a topic that I'm willing to discuss. And there are other topics that he's not willing to discuss. So we're both at different points in our road to recovery. But the idea that I've been having bad dreams from trauma, I think I've since pretty much proven this happened to me, because I started having nightmares that I didn't understand. I started waking up and having. I remember waking up terrified and being covered in a certain product of your body, of a male body. If that, you want to just talk about adding to the confusion. 13 years old, you wake up drenched in sweat and terrified, heart racing. Maybe you even cried out to wake up, shaking yourself awake. But then you're also, a certain part of you has reacted a specific way, and there's a certain substance all over you. I remember getting in trouble once because I got up in the middle of the night to take a shower to get that stuff off of me. My parent, that may have been when I finally told my mom. I don't know. But
talk about it. It's like, what do I say? I don't want to lie. I'm not doing anything bad. Just don't ask me that question. Just go away. Go back to sleep.
Yeah, which they wouldn't. My parents could not sleep if anybody else in the house was awake. If they knew anybody else in the house was awake. Yeah. So, yes, Jen, I did have memories. I did have memories in my dreams. But I didn't. I'm talking about the conscious memories. I'm awake and I'm in a safe place, and I'm thinking about the events. And this was in therapy, and all of a sudden, I started understanding why, when I saw certain things, I would react a specific way. In this case, I'm not even talking about I saw certain things happening, like, say, in adult entertainment or anything like that. I would see something that was in a space, in a position relative to me, and all of a sudden, my body would turn and act a certain way, and I didn't understand what that was. And it was so subtle, that reaction, that I didn't even realize I was doing it until I was sitting in therapy, and the therapist asked me, "Why did your body move like that?" And I asked her, "What do you mean? What do you mean it moved? I thought I was still sitting in the same place." She's like, "Oh no, this is what your body did." And that's when that's when I was able to connect that. And then once I realized that, I was thinking of all the times that something has subconsciously triggered that reaction in me. And it was a lot. It's a prevalent thing that I could remember, just seeing something in that space relative to me, and all of a sudden I would move a specific way, and or my body would have a very specific closing off reaction that I didn't understand why it would do that suddenly.
Learning what some of our own triggers are can be very, very empowering.
Yeah. And okay, so I'm gonna make some fun of myself here, because I think I need to do that for a moment. There's a clip of me on that someone made on my channel of me talking. I was playing Levelhead, and I made a joke about a reaction that I had. I would not have made that joke 4 years ago. I would never have made that joke. Exactly. I would not have made that joke 4 years ago. I probably wouldn't have made that joke 2 years ago. But I've now far enough removed from the therapy to understand that reaction that now I'm okay talking about it and even making jokes about it in regards to myself. I will not joke about it with anybody else.
Yeah, that's a really good example of one of the double-edged swords of humor. So I've paraphrased Stephen Hawking before, talking about how the world is such a horrible and horrific place that if you can't find a way to laugh at it, then you're just going to be, it'll overwhelm you. And that's a complete paraphrase, but
yeah. And I'm gonna make sure I say something here. I'm not laughing at that happening. I'm laughing at the fact that when I had that reaction in the game, it happened, and I was able to actually say, "Oh wow." As since you said the word, I'll just say it. I may have just clinched a little. I would have made it. I consciously thought not to make those jokes.
And I think that's healthy, because recognizing that dark humor triggers people in very, very severe ways, I think is one of those things that you can have a dark sense of humor, but you really have to know your audience. You have to be cognizant of who you're talking to, who's hearing it, because, as powerful as laughter and comedy can be at overcoming stuff like this, some people, it's not that positive experience. It's not helpful. It's completely opposite.
And you have to be really careful what you say, because you never know when someone's going to walk into a public forum like this and hear what you have to say. Because this is a very, you can have different discussions on people's reach on this platform, how it varies, and so on and so forth. But one thing you cannot disagree with is that everybody who's doing this on this forum is open to anyone walking in at any time. So you always have to be cognizant of that, of when is somebody going to walk in and how is what you're saying going to affect them. So that's why I've kind of been trying to be circumspect about certain specific details. So telling the story and being able to tell the story more, and being able to string them together in a consistent storyline, that is something that has progressed over the past 20 years. And I can say that besides the victim advocate course in 2009, that in 2011, when I was finally not alone in that problem I had, and because it was a problem for me because what it was doing to me, that was the next big moment. So not being alone, not feeling as alone in that. And my wife and I'm not going to go into any details about what we did to help me go down that road, besides trying to find the right course of therapy for me to go to.
And we can never, ever underestimate, therapy is not always the same as therapy. Finding the person who's right for you is huge.
And I mean, if I'd never really had any doubts. I mean, this is one that some people say I sound a little creepy when I say this, but I'm one of those people who knew from the moment that we met, like officially met. There were a couple times we met prior that didn't count, but when we finally permanently came into each other's lives in February of 1998, within a couple of days, and it was solid advice. You're right, Jen. When we've actually this will now be a day-to-day thing instead of it was just a fleeting thing before. The overwhelming feeling that I had from the beginning, a strong feeling, was this is the person who's going to help me be a better person. I want to be a better person because this person is around. And I didn't want to lose that. And I've had nothing but evidence to back that feeling up for 22 years now. We met in 1998, officially started in 1998, so we're going on 21 years for sure, almost 22 years. And that moment in 2011 was one of those moments. Now, that's not to say it was an easy moment to have, okay? It was a bit of an eye-opener for her. It was tough for her to realize that I was still trapped in this and that somehow she'd missed it. But the fact that after the initial reaction was kind of there, and I will also say that I was still very much, my first response was to fight and to defend. It was a defensive. We always talk about that fight, flight, or freeze. When it came to criticism, my response was to fight. Always. It wasn't to run away, and it wasn't to freeze. I was so afraid of freezing that I went the other way. I would fight. And that was what happened with my parents, and that's what happened with my wife for a long time. And I've been working hard to make sure it doesn't happen with my daughter. Not perfect at it. It's just going to be a permanent struggle, because for so long, for 20 years, that was my go-to response. So retraining my brain to not feel that. And then it was complicated by the later trauma from the military. So it wasn't an easy moment to have. It never is. It rivaled some of the most difficult things I've had to do, but there was also this overwhelming sense of I'm not alone. And I can actually say, it got to the point where I could look at my wife and say, I'm having a hard time. I'm feeling the urge. And she would do what she could to make sure that I wasn't alone. And for a while, we did very, very serious things to make sure that I couldn't access stuff. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that it has been completely beaten, but I can tell you this. I am much more aware, and this is in part because of my experience with other people, other parts of the world. My worldview has been opened up to understand the inner workings of that world. That even if I see it now, I can't not see, first, how fake it is, and second, how, I don't know how to put this. I just to say I'm better at looking. Well, the empty and hollow, yeah. But I knew that all along. That I wasn't really getting what I needed from this. That this was just empty and hollow. No, this was more of a. And Jen, I'll get to your question in just a second. I'm better able to read people's faces now. Whereas before I was oblivious to it. Because I just wanted to, when I initially exposed myself to this world, it was all about me, right? This was all about me. This is about me recovering from my problem, and I don't care what difficulty it's causing on the people that are involved, how this could potentially mess them up forever, whatever, blah blah blah. I was completely oblivious to that side. It was just, this is entertainment for me, and it's about me, and all that, blah blah blah.
Well, your entire model was somebody consuming another person. You know, not.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't an interactive relationship. Mm-hmm. It was a very one-sided relationship.
And I was completely oblivious to I mean, for a long time I was completely oblivious to any of the undertones that they were pushing with certain mediums and stuff like that. I was just completely oblivious to stuff like that. But since I did the victim advocate training, I've become much more aware, and then I've done training with my wife because we were doing work with people in Germany. And it's just something you become aware of, that I'm now my eyes are much more open to the other side of that industry and the darker side of it. And so now, even if I do find myself exposed to it, I can't not see that side of it anymore. So it's almost like I've retrained my brain, but it's more like my eyes have been opened, and now I see beyond what's being presented to me to what is actually happening, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
It's a personification and
yeah.
It changes something from being a distant concept or just images to real stories, real people, real experiences.
Yeah, I no longer see the characters. I see the actors and the actresses. Does that make sense? It's like you know the story, you're familiar with these characters, but now you're actually looking at the people who are playing them, and it's like you're seeing the behind the scenes of the story, the tales of what happened to these people after they made this movie or this TV show. What became of them as a result of it? It's now I can't not see that anymore, and that was for me a point of growth. It wasn't easy to go from there. Hi, Don. Welcome on in. It wasn't easy to go from there, and it's still not always easy to open up and say. Even to this day, it's not. I mean, I can say, but there's so many factors that I still feel that I can't say anything about this because what are people going to think? But I just honestly, I'm getting to the point where I just don't care what those people think, because I know that there are other people out there who are trapped, who need to hear the other side, who need to hear this side. They don't need to hear the people who've never experienced it telling them how to get better, blah, 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 blah. They need to hear people who have gone through it like them talking about what it was really like and what it's still really like. Am I going to say that I'm completely recovered from that? No, because the idea of that stuff happening both infuriates me, and it's like, I have to make myself. Thank you, Don. I have to make myself disconnect, because I can get so engrossed in it now that I have to make myself disconnect from it. And if I have the option of skipping being engaged with it at all, I will, because I just talking about my story is one thing. Witnessing it in some form of medium, or in some other location where someone is talking about like a news story, or someone's telling a story about what happened to somebody just the other day, or blah, 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 blah. I really have to be careful how much I engage with that side of it, because I can still swing that other way of being over defensive, of overprotective.
Well, when you and I talk about current events news, because we're on polar opposite spectrums, in the distant past, we used to both keep up on current events and talk about them. But now,
yeah,
anything. I mean, it's easy. Anything that starts touching on the dots that people just are unaware of, that connect everything that happens in the world. It's like, oh, here's this news story I just read about. Okay, well, what you don't see is all of the abuse, all of the manipulation, all of the, it's.
You remember the guy from.
Can't take it anymore.
Remember the guy from 60 Minutes who would always say, "And now you know the rest of the story." Do you remember him?
Yeah.
Andy, I don't remember I can't remember now what it is, but he was always one of the last guys on 60 Minutes. And I just, whenever I see those stories going on and I hear people talking about it and I know that they don't know, it's one of those, if only you had somebody like him telling you the rest of the story. So, now you remember I told you that this all started in 2011. This being willing to admit that I was still trapped in this problem, that was in 2011. It wasn't until 2015 that I really started to push the idea on myself that I needed to take care of myself. And frankly, it was still focused on other people, because I knew that if we were going to keep working with the ministry that we were working with in Germany, City Hearts, who creates a safe place for people who have been rescued from the industry, in terms of, we're talking like human trafficking and forced prostitution and stuff like that, not the adult industry, which there's a side of it that's connected to what City Hearts was dealing with, but this is more about the people who are forced into it, either working or the sex industry or stuff like that.
Yeah, there is overlap between the two industries, but it's not always easy to see where it is, which is one of the dangers.
Which is one of the things I was talking about earlier. I'm now able to see the difference. Like, yes. And not just in quality of production, but in the people that are there. It's like, oh, this is that kind.
On somebody's face. I mean, it affects our ability to read other people. You know, it comes from shared understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to see that, once you've seen that in somebody's face, you can recognize it.
Yeah. So, sorry, I didn't mean to breathe right into the microphone. I apologize about that. Being in that position, and in 2015 is when I went to Africa with City on a mission trip. I went to Ghana, and we were working with City Hearts there. In that case, what they were trying to do there was keep kids in school, because if they kept them in school, then they were less likely to fall into work trafficking, which was the biggest problem they had there. So I was front and center. I was in that world. I was on the streets seeing the kids that were at risk. And then I came back, and then later that summer, I went to England, and I was given a tour of some of the different City Hearts sites where they were people that had been rescued, but and they were out of their own country, and they were fighting to be able to stay there, and it was all kinds of stuff. So I knew from those two trips that I needed to take care of myself if I was going to have any chance of contributing meaningfully to those ministries. So that's when I brought it up with my wife of, I need to find something. And so that's when we started looking. But again, it took something outside of me to open my eyes and get my attention. And as I think I've tried to make it clear, if I had been exposed to that in, say, the late 1990s, I don't know if I would have caught that. I don't know if I would have realized that I needed that before. Because I was still wholly blind to that side I was still very blind to that side of the world. So it's like stages on that road to recovery. There comes a point where you can finally see, you're finally self-aware enough to know that this isn't just going to be one of those you sweep it under the carpet and eventually it will go away kind of things, that this is something that you're actually going to have to be willing to take a risk and put yourself into a position to feel more, to remember more, with the goal being, when you come out the other side, you have the potential of finally being able to do what I'm doing, talk about it, share your story, and help others.
It's not dissimilar to other ways that we strengthen our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
So with muscular, you're tearing, when you exercise, you're tearing muscles, but I mean, you have if you were to run, or you were to go do extreme exercise and do a lot of damage, but then not be able to take care of your body properly to let it recover,
then it was a waste.
Be damaged.
Yeah, it was a waste.
And so emotions, the mental health is very similar, and the concept of these exposure therapies, it's, it's so difficult to go through our stories, to share it. But if you can share it in an environment that is safe, and then you have somebody help walk you through the aftercare, then you become stronger for it. And so every time you're able to repeat that process. And the key is the safety and the aftercare. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's going to be obscenely hard, but you're stronger after.
Well, and I'm going to say that the therapy that I ended up going through was some of the hardest stuff that I ever went through. And while I had already been exposed to what I was going to be exposed to, the breaking down of the walls that happened with that therapy is what pushed me to the extreme breakdown that I had at the end of 2016. Because while I was tearing down walls for this other thing, I was unintentionally opening myself up to the other things that were bothering me. So it was rough. And I said before, when my mom told me that she went to bed every night thinking that she could get up the next day and I wouldn't be around anymore, but I'd never even entertained that thought. There was one time when I thought, you know what, I could, and up to this point I had just been thinking, you know what, I cannot wait for this year to be over. I want it to be done and move on. I'm done with 2016. Let's bring on 2017. And by the way, 2017 wasn't that much better. And 2018 was marginally better.
Yeah, it's when the realization that this is just how the world is. Because I think everybody has the capacity to see that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just where you go from there that distinguishes, like, what is it that's worth sticking around?
Yes.
If you get to the point where you see the world that way, then it's what is it that's worth sticking around that kind of distinguishes whether it's possible or not. So
yeah, I remember there was a moment. I don't remember specifically the day or where I was or anything, but I remember there was a moment in October of 2016 when I just had the thought, actually, you know what? It was later than that. October of 2016 was when I started to get to this whole thing of I'm so completely done with this world. I mean, not this world, this year. I want it to be over with. And remember, October 2016 was when two very big parts of my childhood vanished. So I'm 40. What the time? No, I was 2016. So I was 38 years old. And at the end of 2016, two things that had been a part of my life for as long as I can remember, happy points, things that I turned to as distractions, vanished within a day of each other. So when I got to the end of 2016, everyone was talking about 2016 as the year that everybody died and they were ready for 2017 to come along. For me, none of that registered until the very end of 2016, when within one day of each other, or maybe it was 2 days, Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds died. I didn't remember a world where Star Wars and Singing in the Rain didn't exist. I had no memory of that. So with everything that had happened, and I'll get back into what the therapy was in a moment, but I'm in the aftermath of that therapy because we changed that therapy. In October of 2016, we changed it from focusing on what we'd been focusing on to focusing on helping me deal with the anxiety that was coming from my trying to escape the Air Force and the other side effects of tearing down all those walls. And there's a moment coming in December of 2016, which I would say this was, if you want to talk about having a sense of closure, it was in December of 2016. So I'll get to that in just a second. But at the end of 2016, when those two finally passed away within 2 days of each other, I finally felt what everyone else felt about to that 2016. Because those two, I mean, I still love watching Singing in the Rain. It is one of my favorite movies. It's just so fun. It's just so fun and enjoyable. And Princess Leia has always been around for me. It's just I don't remember a world without Princess Leia. And I always remember the one from Empire more than the one from Return of the Jedi. But that's just me. So yeah, it was. But I actually remember the reason why I said actually the point where I thought about, I'm done with this world entirely was actually here. It was in Dallas, and I even remember what was happening when it happened. I know. I remember because I could actually figure out the exact day if I wanted to, but I had to ride the bus down to an intersection near us, get off, walk across the street, and pick up my wife's phone from the thing. And it had been driven over, it was shattered, but it still worked. And I was just thinking, this just yet another thing. After everything we've been through, getting away from the Air Force, and then all the difficulties we had moving and finding work, and here I am 6 months later, and nothing's better. I just remember walking back. There's a bridge, and not this apartment, but the other apartment that I was walking back, there was a bridge. And I remember walking over the bridge and just looking out over that, and there was no way I was going to be able to do anything at that bridge because it was a 20-foot drop to the water, and the water was about 10 feet deep. But I do remember thinking, there are snakes down there. And I was just looking at it as I was walking. I never stopped. I just kept walking. And I just had the thought, I really, if it were to all end right now, I don't think I would be disappointed. And it lasted for all of 10 seconds, and then it was gone. And that was all connected to just everything that had happened in the aftermath of me leaving the Air Force. But that was the only time. So when I started doing the therapy, now I'm going to give you guys you can look this up if you want. It's called EMDR. Are you talking about the actual music, or are you just talking about figuratively? Because so the therapy one of the issues that we had picking therapy was both magically. One of the issues that we had picking the therapy to go to was in part what was available where we were. And for the specific type of trauma that I'd gone through, EMDR was what we decided to give a try. My wife helped me make the decision, helped me give it, try to see if it could help me with processing it and memories of it. EMDR it involves eye motions back and forth, but it also involves physical sensations, and it's very different from accelerated resolution therapy, which is what I have been going to officially since November of 2018. That was my first time actually going through being in place doing the ART as opposed to doing the long distance stuff that I did while I was deployed last year. The thing about EMDR was it was so physically draining. You would not think that sitting there trying to drag these, trying to remember these things while watching a laser go back and forth on a wall, or a hand go back and forth right in front of you. So it's like, and I can't even set the right pace. If I actually have a video somewhere I could show you that's actually very similar to the EMDR one, but it's for ART. So I was having to watch this thing go back and forth, right? And it was either a hand or there was a laser kind of light grid that would go back and forth. And there were these two things that I would hold in my hand that would cause physical sensations. That was the other side of it. And the therapist would have me she'd say, okay, so think about this. Now, what does that make you, I want you to think about this, and we'll just do the session. So, and it was always like 30 seconds to a minute. So then we come out of it and just say, what do you feel? And so then I'd say the feeling. She says, focus on that feeling. And then she would keep going. Now, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? And it was just on and on and on. And you would be amazed at how exhausting that process is. I would be wrecked after it. And it didn't help that no one at my workplace understood. So this is 2016. I started trying to leave the Air Force in January of 2016, when my career was essentially sabotaged by the outgoing leadership because, for many reasons probably, but in part because I'm wary to say what. Let's just say me and the leadership had a falling out.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not specifically relevant to the story, so it's not.
Well, no,
you don't need to.
Yeah, I had but in October of 2015, I was looking at extending. By January of 2016, I was looking for any exit possible, and that process was ongoing as the year was going on. And in April of 2016, they actually put me in a very high up leadership position in the shop. But then I would disappear for these therapy sessions, and they didn't understand why when I would go to these therapy sessions, I wouldn't come back. At one point, my therapist was at the point of calling the unit and telling them, the regulation that you are not allowed to ask these questions. And if you continue to ask these questions, then the next person that's going to call you is going to be the JAG office, because my leadership in my flight kept asking me what was going on, what was I doing, why was I going, and they are not supposed to ask that. I mean, the whole point of being able to go to someone like that is so that you don't have, so you don't, okay, yes, but in the military it's different. In government, in certain government, particularly in the U.S. government, there are regulations that if you do not abide by them, they will throw the book at you. And it took my, well, for one, it took her actually finally putting me on quarters. I would go to, I would always try to arrange the therapy for in the afternoon, but sometimes I couldn't. I'd have to go in the morning, and it took her putting me on quarters afterwards, and I would just take a picture of it and send it to the unit, because we lived, the hospital where the clinic was 45 minutes from our work center. So I'd have to drive 45 minutes there, and then if I was going to go back to work, I'd have to drive another 45 minutes, and that was assuming it didn't take me a half an hour just to get myself to the point where I could drive after an hour-long appointment. So we're talking, I was losing half the day just to go to these appointments, and then I wouldn't come back. So as far as an employer would be, you could see why they would be concerned of why am I just vanishing, but they weren't allowed to ask these questions. And she started putting me on quarters to get them to stop asking, and they kind of sort of did, but there was always this subtle, do you really need to go right now? Can you push this until later kind of thing? So I had that stress going on top of that. So then we started the therapy in the end of June. And I mean, I am to this day, I'm still not sure how I managed to get myself back to my house safely, because I kind of gotten used to driving exhausted. That career field kind of would just put you in situations where you ended up driving home really tired. And as long as I could remember most of my trip home, I figured I was still okay. The problem came when I stopped being able to remember all of those, like, I have no memory of driving. Like, this entire section of my trip, I don't remember being on the Autobahn. I don't remember what I did. I don't remember the cars that were around me, when normally I could remember all of those things.
When you start recognizing, like, oh, I'm home, and I don't remember getting here.
Yeah, I'd be sitting outside. Like, the car would be in the driveway, and my wife would call my phone and say, "Are you okay?" I'm like, yeah, I'm coming in. Sorry. And it got so bad that at one point, twice, I nearly destroyed my diesel engine by putting gas in it. Cost me 600 euros combined. That mistake. And then after the second one, I still somehow was the one that drove us home, and I nearly drove my wife's car headlong into someone else. Now I have enough memory of that one that I'm pretty sure that person ran their stop sign, but I was so unaware that they were doing it that I almost drove right into them, and it would have totaled the car. So it was getting pretty rough. And our cat of 13 years, who had been the light of our household, whenever you walked in, he was always there to greet you. He was so happy to see you, and he just wanted to tell you all about the day and sit in your lap and purr and everything. He died the day before one of those sessions. So yeah, it was rough. And then at work, the whole process of trying to get out was it was stressful. So I'm sitting here trying to get myself taken care of for this other thing, and work was just fighting it. The fact that I was able to make any progress in this at all, I'm still astounded by. But I mean, to just make this picture even more clear, not only was all that going on, but I was remembering details that I had never really been able to conceptualize by going through that therapy. I was seeing things that up until this point had been blurs for me. And I was actually able to see them in sequence, whereas before they were fragments. So all of this was coalescing in my head, and then I was trying to still function as an adult in the military with in a career field where if you didn't show up for work, they didn't just say, oh, he's gone AWOL, he's got 3 days before we send. No, if they don't know where you are within an hour, they send the police.
Yeah.
So there was all that stress going on, which frankly led eventually to my developing anxiety and having my mental breakdown at the end of 2016, in October of 2016. So we kind of stopped with that therapy to help me get back down to a functioning. I guess you could just say get me functional to get through.
Well, that balance between treatment and functionality, it's if you think about where you and I are, respectively, are different places. How have we discovered that we struggle to maintain normal jobs? The process of discovery is hell.
Yeah. And so I'm sitting here talking about how that therapy helped me to conceptualize things that I hadn't been able to before and put it in sequence. There are things that happened when I was in the military that I took part of. I'm aware of that side. I'm aware of what I did, and I'm aware, but there are parts that I still. Okay, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to get off this as quickly as I can. When the thoughts start coming up, I start to feel like I'm still there again, and I'm just going to move on. The job responsibility was still the same. I was managing, at that point, I was managing the people who were doing the job that traumatized me. So, and
we don't need to really go into the work stuff because that's going to open a.
Yeah, I wanted to give you guys a little context to why what happened with the therapy and why it became so. It's not just as easy as saying I need to get myself help. It's also being able to do that and feeling safe enough that you can do that. And the instant I no longer felt safe, we stopped. We just stopped progressing. I never progressed any farther going down that road of putting the memories together. However, this is what the therapist did. And I think for her part, I think for her part, this was probably one of the more brilliant things that she could do next to realizing we needed to stop and refocus on keeping me from being hyper anxious and alert. Was she shifted the entire conversation away from let's remember what was let's get you to the point where you can actually go through this process, see the story without feeling like you're still in it, to let's talk about what you're going to do next. Now that you know this all happened to you and you understand the context and you understand the ramifications, what do you want to do next? And she didn't push any specific thing. She just said, where are we going to go next? Okay. She basically just said, we're done doing this part. You've, for lack of better terms, you've graduated. We're moving to the next phase, even though it was just, go ahead.
That aftercare.
The aftercare.
It's not just about reliving the experience. It's not just about remembering. It's the aftercare to help you build up that resilience, build up that strength.
Yes, there was the, and she was the one that made sure that I had something in the system so that as soon as I separated, I could still get care. And I was actually allowed to continue seeing her while we lived, because we lived there 2 months after I actually separated, before we went back to the States. So I continued to see her through the end of June because I was already her patient. But when I left Germany, she actually put me in a system that guaranteed that someone was going to check in and make sure that I was getting care until the VA picked it up. So that was the aftercare side of it. That was part of it. But now, again, she didn't actually say these words, but I managed to figure out on my own that this is what she was asking about. It says, what do you want to do about him? That movement from you're the victim to now you're the one who can say something and keep other people from having it happen to them. That moment. Basically, she was slowly pushing me, without actually saying it, from I'm sitting here talking about how this affected me, what happened, blah, 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 to I want to report. And I had lots of questions, like what's the point of reporting? And it wasn't until she hit on the whole concept of if you report it, it's in the system and nothing may happen right now. But if there's someone else who has been, this information could be the thing that pushes them over. Or it could be what gives the police what they need to finally go forward with it. And frankly, seeing this, some of this involved me actually seeing a current picture of that person. And seeing that person had children was the catalyst. I wanted to get my story in someone's hands, so that just in case,
if there was ever an investigation,
they would know.
Your story could corroborate.
Exactly. They would know. Now, earlier that same year, I'd gone to another victim advocate course, which ironically focused more on the ineffectual system that the military had in dealing with the problem inside the military, which was actually very good for me because it allowed me to stay separate enough from it that I could still do my therapy, because we were talking about it had a context of this happening that I was never a part of. Like for me, it happened. I was a kid. And I was a civilian. That class was talking about people who were in the military, who were perpetrating or who were perpetrators. So that class focused a lot on how the system was failing to actually failing to prosecute people adequately, or accidentally prosecuting the wrong people too far. But it gave me that it also seeded that thought into my head of why reporting even long after the fact was important. So when the time came to think about it, now I had told the person running the victim advocate course, because you're supposed to let them know if you have been a previous victim or if you were a survivor. So she knew that I'd had an experience, but she knew nothing about it. So then when I messaged her and said I wanted to talk at my base, she kind of had an idea. So it took me 2 months to get up the nerve to have that meeting. And she waited. And she had to drive all the way up from Ramstein, and for us that was an 1.5-hour drive. And she kind of had to wait and stand by until I could finally say, okay, let's meet. And when we first got there, we were in that room for 4.5 hours. For the first 2 hours, I think, I couldn't talk about it. We just talked about victim advocacy and stuff like that. Until I finally got to the point where I could finally say, okay, I need to tell my story, and I need to do it now, because if I don't, I'm going to lose the nerve. And so she just pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. And I said everything that I could say, which I'm going to say right now was nowhere near as detailed as what I shared today. Although it was also a little bit more detailed because there were some details that I didn't share today on purpose. But it wasn't as full a construct yet.
It wasn't the full story. It was reported.
Yes. And so I did the report, and I made it for people who are in the know. And I honestly, at this point, I've started to forget something. It was an open report. What was I can't remember the term for it. Basically, it was my choice to keep it closed. So what would happen is my commander would be informed that a report had happened, but no other details would be released. So all they would know is that someone inside their unit had made a report, but it wasn't being made public yet. So no one else was informed.
You did a restricted report.
Restricted, that's it. Restricted report. That's a restricted report. I did an unrestricted report, because in order to do an unrestricted, in order to take it to the authorities, because for one thing, we needed to figure out who to talk to, because we didn't know, because I was a civilian, the perpetrator was a civilian, we were both military sponsored dependents, but it happened on German soil. in a different district from where we were, in a different state from where we were. So there was some, yeah. And it was 20 at this point, 25 years prior, 26 years prior. So there was some confusion, and also because it was still hard for me to pin down when the first one happened. That was big, because if all of them had happened after the age of 11, while he was still under a certain age, it changed the dynamic entirely. But because I was able to figure out that it did happen prior to me turning 11, that meant that it could be prosecuted the same way. There were so many things that I needed her help to walk me through, and the whole time I had the therapist just kind of asking me if I wanted to talk about where it was going further, and then just focusing on me doing anxiety exercises to keep myself from breaking down even any further. So I did an unrestricted report, and this was in December of 2016. I had to go to work the next day, and I didn't have a choice. I had to go to work. So I did the unrestricted report. I got to work. And honestly, at this point, it was almost to the point where I was in cruise control, because I'd done everything I could. As far as I knew, I'd done everything I could on the getting out part and applying to become a chaplain assistant. And I also knew that Georgia was going to start insisting soon that I get my orders in place so that I could move there, because that's where they wanted to move me, which they informed me later that month. Actually, no, they didn't inform me until February. But they knew they did say that you need to get this figured out because you're running out of time. So I went to work the next day, and I'm standing there because I had a standing desk at work. So I'm standing there working, and all of a sudden the door opens, and I see the commander in the first shirt walk in. And they pointedly do not look at anyone in the room but our flight commander and the flight chief. And they said, "You guys, we need to have a conversation." And so then they left.
And of course, you're sitting here thinking,
"Oh no, I know what they were talking about."
Exactly.
I know what they were talking about. An unrestricted report means the commander was told who. So she knew it was me. And I'm not, well, the details can't have to stay restricted for, for privacy's sake and stuff like that. She at least had to. She at least had to tell them enough that they could back down on me, because they still were questioning the need to go to that therapy. Because that was a part of what happened in my unrestricted report. I talked about the pressure I was feeling at work to not do this. So, and I mean, the instant that conversation happened, I never once heard a single word again about why do I need to go. In fact, all I heard was, "Good luck, drive safely." Never once heard anything else about the need to go. But it took me filing an unrestricted report to finally get them to realize this is serious, people, and you need to back off.
It kind of goes back to what we were talking about, sharing with family or bosses, people that have no freaking business knowing about our stories and our troubles and our traumas. Like, no business whatsoever. None of their beeswax. But if you're able to let them in on it, just human nature will sometimes make it easier for you.
And Jen, you say that, but people still don't like talking about these things. People get uncomfortable when you talk about, I mean, think about it. People get uncomfortable when you talk about sexual experience, period. Now let's talk about traumatic sexual experience. And let's talk about how it still affects you to this day and blah, 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 blah. People aren't comfortable having those conversations, which is why do you think I've been piping these pictures through this whole time? Over there. Yeah, point in the right direction, because it's actually over there to me. Over there, those pictures. Because too many people feel alone. They feel that they're struggling alone, or even if they know they're not alone, that doesn't mean they feel like they have anyone they can turn to talk to, or that understands or gets them. Because too many people just aren't willing to inform themselves enough to understand. And really, could I hold that against my flight commander for not knowing what I was going to get help about? I hadn't told him. He didn't know anything. He just knew that I was going for therapy, and I didn't have to tell him. Frankly, I didn't even need to tell him I was going for therapy. I just needed to say I have a doctor's appointment. And then if they pushed further, then the doctor could then insert themselves at the commander level to get the commander to stop them. Hey, Sparky.
But
welcome.
There's the unintentional retribution. You don't work for me. You don't work with me. I'm not going to work with you. Kind of BS.
Well, they had a mission to accomplish, and they wanted to get that done. And let's just be honest, the military has never fully figured out how to handle this process. Their environment has created, and I will say this, and then we'll just move on from this topic. Their environment creates the opportunity for predators to thrive. It's a totalitarian environment where everyone is expected to just do as they're told. So it's an environment where such things thrive. It's a necessary evil for doing the military's mission, having that kind of environment. But the negative side to having that kind of environment is people like that thrive in that kind of environment. So,
hello, Sparky Bosch.
Yep. Another fellow Fluffy InstaFluff and MS viewer. Sparky actually is constantly playing cooking games with MS. So yeah, here's the thing. part of the follow up to the reporting was deciding who needed to be told, when and where, all that stuff. Some of it would need to be told to the German police, but really most of it would need to be told to the state in which the person resided. I'm going to be honest with you, because of everything that was going on, I don't remember if that second step was ever fully carried out. But I will tell you this. I am going to follow up with it. I'm going to reach back out to those people and say, hey, did we actually ever finish this process? Because I wasn't capable of continuing it because of what was going on with my life and other reasons. But I am going to look into it now to see if we ever fully finished it. But in terms of how I felt about what I did, at that point, knowing it had been reported and knowing that the right people had been contacted in terms of who needed to be told and so on and so forth, in terms of recording it and making sure all those things happened, because all of those steps had been taken, I felt a huge weight lifted from me of finally, not just somebody knows, but somebody knows who's in a position to do something about it and is doing something about it. And that person was me. Not them, it was me. They could easily have done all that with me just taking a passive mode in that. I could have just given them permission, but I didn't do that. I wanted to. And Sparky, that's Cellist Mike. She said hi to the voice in the background. So I could easily have done that, but I didn't want that. I wanted to be the one who's done. And for months, I had an appointment set on my phone. And it was, I know I said it in Germany because of the time it was going off, to remind me to call the detective in the state in question so that I could do the next step. But that was a reminder that this ball is in my court. It's not just that somebody knows who's in the position to do something about it. I am now the one who's in the position to do something about it. And
you're, for the first time, well, at that point, for the first time, you're in a position of power over this entire
yeah, because even with all the steps in progress that I'd made, I can't say that I felt that I had finally achieved that control back that was supposed to be mine from the get-go. I never really felt that I had gotten that control back until I did that. Now, Jen, to answer your question, it is scary. It is very scary. It was also, it felt like something had lifted. It felt like I'd taken a step that needed to be taken, and that I was doing the right thing as far as other people were concerned. But it definitely also felt that there was this fear of, and this is part of that. Still, this you can reach a point where you feel like you've recovered enough to tell the story, but still not feel like you're all the way there. There was still a part of me that for some reason didn't want to keep talking, because I didn't want to ruin another person's life like mine had been ruined. And I'm not going to lie here, that I was feeling that confusion about ruining his life, because the question was in my head: what if he got help and is no longer doing this? Now, that other question of but what if was strong enough that I reported. But even as I was doing that, the thought was still in my head of, is doing this really the right thing to do? Because what if he has actually gotten the care that he needs? And but see, I frankly don't care. I don't want to know, because as far as I'm concerned, so I'm having this rational thought next to this irrational thought of, but he wasn't okay when he did what he did to me. And that's what I'm reporting this about, because of what he did to me. It doesn't matter if he's never done it again, that he got the help he needed, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter. So I was having this rational thought of what that power, what that control felt like, right next to this irrational thought of, I'm still angry. which is why I said earlier I have to be careful if I get in a situation where I start to feel that anger about it, kind of story, that kind of event being told in another situation that I have no control over other than just get myself removed from. I can still feel that anger. That's why I still have to be careful. So honestly, I'm not really sure where else to go with the story from here. I'm willing to answer some questions. I know that Jen, you asked a question earlier that I can go back to if you want.
Well, and that's this kind of story. There's not really an end to the story, because this is part of your life for the rest of your life, and so it's, the end of the story is really just you're at today. It's an end
of a chapter.
Like you may be in a place where you can follow up. Maybe not, but that's where you are now, and so it's that story is still going, will always be still going.
And I can tell you, I'm nervous as crap. I'm nervous as crap about what's going to happen when people who know me hear this, if they find it on YouTube and hear it, because this is a side of me that has never been spoken of publicly. This experience.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things that the more removed a person is, the less impactful their opinion on you is. So the people that are that have the closest, most intimate relationships with you, I think if anything, I think they would have to be really naive for this not to be an explanation, not a revelation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I also have the stressor of I have my family. My family is actually coming to visit in 5 weeks. Not my wife's family. My family. No, I did not.
Then there you go. Just don't.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean it's not still going to be on YouTube. And one member of my family is very much a subscriber to this channel.
Okay.
That doesn't necessarily mean said family member watches everything, but that person is a subscriber.
So, yeah. If they watch it, then you now have a new flavor profile in that relationship.
Jen, that feeling never goes away.
Good.
If I'm going to be completely honest, in my experience, we're talking about my experience here, that feeling never goes away. Because, okay, so like one of the things that I've had cycling right here. I knew I was going to get one of these backwards right there. The 1 in 6 thing, and the bot's been posting some of it in there, is here. So this website, which I have visible right here. One of the things that the reason this exists is because it wants you to not feel alone, to understand that the number is higher than people realize of how many males in particular, and the number, I think it's 1 in 4 for females. So that's why I made sure I have one that
1
was
in 4 for children.
Helpful, yeah.
So I think that women are higher than 1 in 4 because that's
Well, I know it's 1 in 4 for college age women. I don't know what the overall total is. I don't have that regularly available. I just know this one. This is and actually I think this used to be 1 in 5, so they've changed it to 1 in 6. Yeah. So this context. So if I were in a chat room in this context, or in this context, or I was at a group like Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever in that context, or a group based on this site right here, I probably wouldn't feel as alone, because even if we weren't openly talking about said things, it's pretty much a given concept that everyone in the room has probably experienced this. But outside of a context like that, you're never going to know, because people don't talk about this. If it's going to come up, it's going to come up in a, when is the last time in casual conversation something like this came up? I can't ever remember something like this ever coming up.
It's not a conversation I have with people.
No, I've had it.
Never shared my stories.
I've had it come up in conversations that I've been a part of for a couple different reasons, not the least of which being I've not kept it secret that this stuff happened to me. I've just not shared the details. And as I shared earlier, I talk about it a lot in this book. I'm going to be frank here. This entire series, okay, everybody newsflash. This is about me. You think it's about you, but no, this is about me. The entire series is about me. I take the world in its innocent form, I rip it apart, I destroy it, and leave it in a state where the people are clinging to some form of reality that they can hold on to and are just barely surviving in it. And then I throw more trauma at them, and more trauma, and more trauma, just to see how far I can push them before they break or they rise up. See the name? So the next names are Fall, Shatter, and Unite. So this is a story of my journey. So when you hear about that, on a world brought to the brink of destruction, life now clings to the shattered remains of the planet's crust. In 1988, in a room in Marburg, Weiss, Germany, my world was shattered. And ever since, I've been clinging to the fragments of reality. And it's become easier, but slowly and more recently. So when you're reading this story and you're reading about this, I straight up put the story of what happened to me that I shared today in this book. It's in there. And at least one of my beta readers, when she got to that part, she made a point of putting a note in there saying, this was very, very tastefully handled, and then went on to comment about how not enough people are talking about it. So you're not just going to get the whole, in terms of the context, the world is me, it's the blah, 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 blah. There's a character in here who's literally me, and and I put that, what happened to me, in here. So anyone who's read that book knows what I'm talking about. So, yeah, that wasn't a pitch for you to buy the book. If you have a hard time getting it, reach out to me on Discord. We'll figure out something. It's just, that when I was writing that, and because that's there, and because that forward is there, it comes up because people ask about that forward. Like, what are you talking about? And then there's the conversation. Or they'll come up to me and say, I was a victim. And I'll look at them and say, no, you're a survivor. Because that, I said earlier, what's the book about? It's are you defined by your tragedy, or do you redefine it? Are you a victim or are you a survivor? For too long, I was a victim, and I acted like a victim. And I lashed out at people because I always felt like I was a victim. You can be, but the difference between being a victim and a survivor is that a victim is still trapped in that state, whereas a survivor has said, I will not be defined by things that happened to me. I'm going to be defined by what I choose to do instead. And
I think, yeah, Jen, we can be both. There are times where you feel more one. There are times where you have the motivation to be the other.
Yeah, and with PTSD, with my road on with PTSD, that's brought that back front square and center. There are days when I feel like I can actually talk to people and make a difference, and in other days I just feel like I'm a fake, that I'm just pretending. I mean, I've said before, most days I don't feel like actually streaming. I just choose to do it because I know that by the end of it I'll feel better. Generally, this stream is a little different. I'm just talking about streaming, period. I mean, one of my favorite things to do on Twitch is Extra Life. It's a huge thing for me.
Dude.
It started and defined everything I did on here.
We are so close. We're a month away.
Yeah. Which I have an announcement about that at the end of this one, about Extra Life. But that's one of the funnest things I have, and I so enjoy doing it. I so enjoy talking about it. I mean, I stream to the Extra Life channel because I want people to know about the need. Guess what? Some of the Extra Life money goes to help kids like me. They don't have cancer. They don't have leukemia, or they didn't have an accident where an arrow went through their head or anything like that. Some of them are victims of abuse. Some of them are victims of domestic abuse, sexual abuse. They have entire wings where that it's just there for the mental care of children like that. So, I mean, that's why I have never felt any issue, that there was any problem with talking about Extra Life at the same time we talk about stuff on this particular stream. Because for me, the two are not disconnected. That when I talk about this Extra Life right here, and I talk about these medals and all the money that's been raised for the hospitals that I raised it for, I'm not just raising it for kids like my niece. I'm raising it for kids that were like me.
Because it still happens.
It still happens.
And we can do something. You know, sometimes you're in a position to help make a difference and make it not happen and prevent. Sometimes you're in a position to help, you know, that aftercare. And the long-term road that somebody gets, you know, when they're our age, when they're older, that long-term road can be affected by Extra Life.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Jen, to answer the question, yeah, that feeling is never going to go away. I, to this day, still feel alone, and I actually feel particularly alone in a room full of people. I don't. And most of them, and there's only one place that I found that to be not true. And it's not a room full of people that I know. It's not a room full of people. It's not a room full of family. Now, obviously, with my immediate family, I know my wife, I know my daughter. I don't feel, although sometimes I can feel a little bit alone, but that's not their fault. The places where I have felt the most welcome are Dragon Con and Twitch, because I've found that most people who are on this medium, who are streaming to here, all in some way feel lonely, feel that they can connect people better through this medium. And the thing that I find really fascinating is to see, because I've been doing this for years and I've been watching streamers for years, and I know streamers who 3 or 4 years ago would never have thought of going to TwitchCon, and now are going to TwitchCon because they were here and they were accepted and they felt safe enough that eventually they were willing to say, okay, let's take this to the next step. And not everyone is there. Not everyone's going to get there. Some people just can't go because let's face it, traveling to TwitchCon is expensive, especially if you live in a different country. Traveling to DragonCon was never cheap. I prioritized that one because that was the place that I'd gone in 2011. Remember, 2011, this big year. That event with my wife happened right after DragonCon, the first time we went to DragonCon. And going back to DragonCon ever since has been connected to that for me. If this is a place where I can go where I know people are hurting, they're lonely, and everyone in the room, at least when we walk into the room, we've got something we can talk about. I mean, think about it. Clearly, I wear this hat for different reasons. Want to know why? Because my hair is thin enough that the lights on the green screen just screw with it. So that's why I started wearing the hat. Now it's just my thing. But look what's on it. Batman. Batman's not my favorite DC thing, but I really enjoy Batman stories. And look down here. Captain America. I got Captain America stuff all over the place. I used to actually have some of the stuff up there. You go into a room at a con like that, like Dragon Con, or at TwitchCon, there's always someone, at the very least, you got one thing in common. And that's why I've felt the least lonely in those locations, but you can still feel lonely there. You still can. No, the communities you've met to deal with this. Yep, it's harmony, community feeling. Yep, and that's why Cruffles had it earlier, and I'll post another message in there. That little thing right there, that pledge right there. That pledge is more than just a button you can show on your thing. That's a thing. That's a thing where you're pledging to say, I am going to be a welcoming person. I'm going to contribute to communities that welcome people, and doesn't look down on them for choices they've made, lifestyles they lead, circumstances they find themselves in. Nothing. It just says, hey, you're a person, therefore you're important. You exist, therefore you have value. And I acknowledge that. So all I see right now, is ones and zeros. Sparky, Pugwash, Jen, your ones and zeros on this screen right here. I am the Don. Chalice Mike. Well, Chalice Mike, I know a little more. But yeah, I can fix it later. Cruffles, I've seen your face, so I know you. I know that someone claiming to be you at least, has a face that talks. RD Mac, Nick Zumia earlier that spoke up. Most of the people that I see on here are just ones and zeros. But they're still important because you're a person who decided to come into this place and spend your time existing here. And that's what that thing's about. And that's what this stream was all about when we started doing this. I mean, we said before, this was about getting Cellist Mike to let me put a picture of him on the screen. When we first started this, he didn't want it, and he still doesn't want a camera. Or just, but first it was get his voice. Now we've got a picture. So see, we're making progress. But,
yeah, speaking of feeling alone, when you feel like such a fake human being, such a, I don't know, some people word it differently. I've heard people say, like, I feel like a piece of trash, or I've heard people say I feel alone, or I've heard people say I feel fake. But, you know, when everybody else is, anonymity helps, Twitch helps, Dragon Con, things like that, places where what you know about them is something you can relate to. But
the thing about Dragon Con is you can go to Dragon Con and wear cosplay that completely masks who you are, and no one will ever know it was you. That's what Twitch is. You can go on here and you can be the person that you would rather be, or that you wish you could be, and no one would ever know. But I didn't want that here. I wanted people to be able to take that mask off and just say, hey, you know what? I'm always happy, smiley when I do my stream, but really I'm hurting inside. And I just want to be here and listen. I don't want to talk. I just want to listen. That's fine. Whenever I look over at that, because my chatbot is on a different computer, and I just have it over there mainly just so I can see if anything's wrong with the chat, because sometimes my chat screen on this computer isn't visible, which is generally what you see me looking at over here. It's chat and the actual OBS display of stats, so like dropped frames and things like that. When I look over there and I see somebody in the channel there who's just there, they may have said hi, they may not. All I see is a person who's decided that they feel safe enough to hang out here. Whether I'm making an idiot of myself in Levelhead, or trying to get people to donate to charities, or I'm sitting here telling you about how crappy of a day I've had, or about this little success that I had. Whatever it is, or I'm forcing Cellist Mike to open up and share things he would rather not. That's when I look over there, that's what I see. I see names and people that I've interacted with, but more importantly, I see people who feel safe enough to come here and just hang out and listen. And we talk about topics here that sometimes can make you feel, push you to the edge of how you feel, but the fact that you keep coming back means that you still feel safe. And that's why we have. You okay, dog? He clearly had a bad dream. He just jumped right up. So, if I want to try to put a ribbon on this conversation, it's that thing that's right there. All of these pictures, you'll note, have something in common with them. You're not alone. Yeah, I was trying to reset the doggle cam back up, but for some reason, OBS Studio doesn't like the second cam. So I got to figure out another way to do it. But yeah, if I was going to try to put a pin on this and put a wrap on this, it's, for a long time I felt completely alone in what I was doing. It was just, there was nobody else. It was just me, and everything felt like it was something that was just there to take more control from me. And it took a long time for me to realize that A, that not everybody was out to do that, and that B, that I wasn't actually alone. That doesn't mean I always don't feel alone, but there are times.
And here you are now, 31 years later, sharing with the world.
Yes, this was it. This was the first time I shared publicly. In as I'd like to say well-constructed form as possible, but I don't know. I think I was kind of all over the place. I think I kept it in mostly the thing. My notes were a little less specific. It was just, here are my notes. Are you ready? Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. Go back. Where are things?
Yeah, no, you did a good job.
These are my notes. Are you ready, everybody? There's my notes. These are the things that I was trying to make sure that I talked about. So, thank you, Sparky. Thank you. So, And I think everybody who came and hung out, who contributed, who listened, and again, you're not alone. We're here. And if you ever see me streaming and you just need a place to hang out, that's all this is about. Frankly, I spend most of my days alone, literally alone. The only company I have is a 66-pound puppy, maybe 67 pounds. I think he's almost 70 now, most of the time. So if it wasn't for the people that I hang out with on Twitch, or the few people that I have conversations with in WhatsApp or something like that, or the very few people who I trade emails with throughout the day, I wouldn't actually interact with anybody. So that's kind of why I started doing this again as much as I could, because I wanted to force myself to talk. I wanted to force myself to be somewhere where I could interact with people. So,
may I put in a joke? Not horrible,
sure,
but slightly distasteful. Okay. So you keep posting these things on the stream here about, like pictures of this person. There's the woman with her face in her hands, and then there's this guy. He's just staring off to nowhere. You are not alone. Is that a threat, or is that supposed to be encouraging?
I guess that really depends on where you are in life. Because in context, if we were playing a horror game, and having that posted on the screen could be really funny, a mind twist to play with people. But in this context here, I don't think it's a threat. It's just it's an encouragement that you are not alone. How many times, those of you who are here that actually stream, how many times have you gotten on and it just felt like nobody was there? Sometimes it's like that. And I try to, at the very least, pretend that I'm never alone when I'm doing this, because I never know when someone's going to tune in and listen. So that's why we try to make this place as safe for everybody as we possibly can. Safe and welcoming. And I try to involve myself in communities that do that. So let me give a shout out here. Cruffles, he was here earlier talking. Cruffles does that too. He has an entire Discord channel just for people to open up and talk about. And they have very strict rules on what you can and can't say. And or you can't be in there anymore. That's very accepting community, which is that we need more of that. It doesn't really matter where your community is, as long as you have a community that you can focus on. Look at his last stream. I forgot that he did that, because it was Sunday when he was playing that I'm going to run around and fart at people garden game, but he was talking about mental health and personal support at the same time, which felt so incongruous. Like, we're going to run around and fart. We're going to run around like little animals. Did we lose you in Discord? Yep, Discord died. Discord took the poop. Sorry, no more Tell Us Mike talking. Yeah, exactly. I think you were there. It was so funny. It was just these little small animals running around going. It does sound like an MS stream, except these were a little bit louder. He tries to hide those behind, the minion farts. Hey, are you back? It's real. I see him in there, but it's really bad. Discord's having problems, but at the same time, he was trying to be encouraging. And he was talking about that channel. He was talking about the places. Heck, he even talked about this stream, which I forgot. If I didn't say thank you then, thanks for talking about it, and thanks for making sure people knew that this was not a light stream. So, the cheesy flop. Yep. Well, I had fun taking his emote and putting the sunglasses on the back of the Cruffle butt emote, and putting the sunglasses on the back of it. To say this is how much Cheese Cat cares. She's just gonna flop. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Okay. So, well, it's a little after 3 o'clock my time, and I was hoping I could do that in 2 hours, but it needed a little bit longer. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here and say thank you for the little things. Green Puppy, I appreciate you cooperating today of all days. So I'm really not sure why that bot is just posting that URL. I gotta figure out what command it is that's doing that, because it's not supposed to just be posting that. Maybe I accidentally copied it in there or something. But let me go back to this for just a second. So I want to make sure people see this. So in this browser that I've had these pictures up here, I want to make sure. So this is one resource for you. 1 and 6. This is mostly for men who have gone through this. 1 and 6 is the number, just to give you an idea of the number of men who have been abused in some way, shape, or form. But you're generally sexual assault. RAIN is another organization. This is for anybody that you can reach out to. And we've had the bot posting it. I'll post it one more time. You can get some trained advocates available in chat at those two websites right there. And that phone number right there is their hotline. You can see that's what HOPES is, 4673. And then of course there's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And they'll listen to, and it's not just about do you feel like you're going to, that your life is better if it ends now. They'll direct you to help, whatever kind of help you need. So I just wanted to make sure that I showed those. Those are the three resources that I've been sharing throughout using the bot and other things. And I will be back on Wednesday. Yes. Wednesday for sure. Oh, wrong one. There we go. Wednesday for sure with my Wednesday night stream. I'll be playing some more Levelhead. Now, I said earlier I had an announcement to do with that thing down there, Extra Life. So for years now, I've been a member of the Pixel Sharks team. It's a team that I started. It was mostly a team of veterans and active duty members, just because we wanted to have a team to help organize and do our things around. But that team has mostly moved on to their own teams, to other teams. So at this point, it's pretty much just Chalice, Mike, and I. And we had this discussion over the weekend, and I've decided that I'm going to move to another team because, I mean, I really want to take my Extra Life to the next level, and I want to be able to raise more for my hospital. And so joining another team is going to help that. So it's not, I think, well, I mean, the discussions have been had, and I've said that I want to join, and they've said, okay, I'm going to be streaming. Extra Life-wise, I'm going to be part of that team regardless, but I'm also going to be streaming to their channel, probably on Tuesdays, but we still have to work that out. So when that happens, I'll be sure to add it into the schedule rotation, but it will be on their channel. So I'll be streaming to 3 channels. This is great. If you really want to build an audience, this is the way to do it. Spread all of your streams amongst 3 channels, because then nobody knows where to find you. But that's just one of those. I told them I could commit to 1 on their channel, and we'll see how that goes. So, but the other thing, more importantly, but beyond that, is that this, with Extra Life now being 34 days away, 34 days away, we are heading into the final stretch. So for the last month leading up to Extra Life, I actually need to make a command for it to show this, but I cut out all the Extra Life and all the other stuff that my bot usually shares for today. But I will be, any new subscriptions or gift subs or donations, like bits and stuff that are made to the channel, I will be taking that amount that comes to me and matching it to donate into the Extra Life. From when on does what count? Me joining the other team or me doing the change to... No, it's starting this week. So pretty much from this point going forward. The matching stuff is from this point going forward. This is the stream on which I'm announcing it. So going forward, if I'm streaming to my channel or to the Extra Life channel, it doesn't really matter. But I mean, it's donations to this channel. So anything that's like new subs or gift subs or tips to this channel, that amount I will take and match back in. So if you tip 100 biddies, then I will donate $2 into this fund right there. So, or if you gift a sub to somebody, the amount that would come to me, I will take that, and I will, which is basically going to come out to the amount of what the sub costs, because we get half of the subs. So me giving that amount and matching it means your $5 sub is going to go into that donation box, and that's for the month that's leading up to and during the Extra Life event. So from now until the end of November 3rd. So those are the two things I wanted to say about Extra Life. Pretty much that was it for now. And thanks again for everybody for tuning in. I'm going to wrap this up and go take care of myself because I want to make sure I'm mentally ready to manage the family, which mostly just going to be making dinner. But thanks again for listening to me ramble on. Thanks for being a supportive community. Thanks for it takes a lot to be present for something like this, especially if this is something that's prevalent in your past. So I don't want to undersell the value of you just being present, especially if you are a survivor, because that's what you are. You are a survivor, and if you are someone that knows somebody in their life who is, being present is extremely important, especially in a place where you know you're potentially going to be hearing things that make you uncomfortable, that could potentially push you down that road. So being present, as long as you were, that's a big deal. So don't sell yourself short on that one. So Chalice Mike and I will be back. Chalice Mike had to duck out early already because Discord was misbehaving. It's fine now, Chalice Mike. But he and I will be back next week. We'll go back to our normal topics on this one. Hey, the fact that you're even willing to say that in a quote-unquote public forum, that's a big deal for you. So you're welcome. And I hope that you don't feel as alone, and that but just like the bot said, if you feel like you need to talk, just let us know. You can join my Discord server, Guthrun's Mischief. We have an entire section that's just for mental health and mental health awareness and mindfulness. And we have roles set to allow you to go in there. And we are carefully cultivating those roles because we don't want everyone to constantly have access to everything in there. Because if you indicate that you need to talk, we're going to give you that role so you can come in and you can talk. When you're done, we're going to take that role away so that if somebody else wants to, they can know that they can come in there and it'll just be them and whoever they want to be there. But the other channel, the other ones like the Living with PTSD one and stuff like that, those will be more open because that's more broad. So I need to actually get my bot working again so these roles can be assigned so you guys can actually indicate you want to be in the mental health discussion stuff. And reach out to your communities, see what they have. I mentioned Cruffles, he has a good one. He has a big one with people who are just willing to talk and listen and so on and so forth. So check out your communities. You'd be surprised how many people make this important. I wish that there was a way to get Twitch to make these kinds of streams when we're talking about things like this a little more visible, so other people can find safe places in whatever community they want that they feel is best for them. But that's not happening right now.
It's not uncommon for the biggest hurdle to be ourselves.
Yes.
Finding either the motivation or the willpower to force yourself, to actually carry on a conversation with a group in Facebook, to actually go to a support group, to actually do it. It's that, for me, is always the biggest hurdle. Isn't where can I go, but actually, making myself do it.
Well, yeah, that there's that, and then there's the next step of opening up a dialogue with somebody, even if all you're doing is saying, "Hey, I'm listening," even though you probably feel like you need to talk to, but just saying, "Hey, I'm listening," that can be so. I'm actually working on getting an emote that's just all about that, about "Hey, I'm listening," since that seems to be something we do on this channel. Have a new emote related to that. I currently only have one more emote slot, and they're all tied to subscription tiers, but I'm going to make sure they're in BTTV so that other people can use them, at least in that context. But eventually we'll get to that point, but it's not. I would rather just be having the conversations than be worrying about growing the channel, if that makes sense. It's more about charity and community and being helpful and a safe place than it is about growing the channel. Does that make sense? I mean, I'd like to grow the channel, but
this isn't about money or a sense of ego or.
No, look where I send.
Is,
Everybody, look, I'm constantly talking about it. If you want to send money this way, send it here. That's not me. So it's not about that. Sorry, I cut you off, Mike.
No, you're good.
So, all right. Well, Charles, Mike, we'll catch you next time. Good luck with your training. And I will talk to you later. I'm actually just deafening. I'm not disconnecting from Discord yet. All right. So again, everybody, thanks for joining. We will see you for sure. I'll be back Wednesday night, 6:30 for some more of me embarrassing myself trying to play level head and look like I know what I'm doing. Hey, we all need a little bit of that in our life, right? Some humble pie. And of course, on Fridays, Extra Life for Kids. That's where I stream on Fridays at 12 o'clock Central. So I was playing Spyro Reignited, but I think I'm going to start a new game this month. So we'll see how that goes. Right? We will catch everybody later. Have yourselves a good rest of your day. And remember, you are not alone.